Good afternoon and welcome to the day 2 of the Autocar Professional Road Safety Conclave, brought to you in association with Continental and ATS. Our annual Road Safety Conclave aims to spread awareness among citizens by striking insightful conversations with industry leaders and experts. While yesterday we discussed about vehicle safety and how technology can improve the safety quotient of new vehicles being introduced by OEMs, today we are going to focus on the 3 E's of road safety. But before getting deeper into the subject, let me first introduce our rich and diverse panel with experts from their respective domains. I would like to welcome Mr. P.K. Banerjee, Chief Executive Director, Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers, Ms. Karuna Raina, Director, Public Policy and Research, Save Life Foundation, Mr. Harish Baijal, former DIG, Maharashtra Police, Mr. Karthik Nagpal, President, Rosemerta Technologies, and Mr. Naresh Raghavan, road safety author and US trained defensive driver. Gentlemen and ladies, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
So as I was saying, the 3 E's of road safety, which are basically the 3 pillars that define safety on the roads. The first E is education. So as per the statistics, around 80% of all road accidents in India occur due to driver error. While all of us have a driving license, but do we really know the best practices while being on the road? The second E is engineering. So road engineering also plays a vital role in ensuring safety of all road users, but we often see unmarked speed breakers, absent lane markings in case of India. So what should be done about it? And finally, the third E, which is enforcement. So hoodwinking the law is quite rampant in India, and what challenges are faced by the police, and how can technology improve effectiveness of traffic rules? So with that context, I would like to let our panelists give their opening remarks pertaining to their area of expertise regarding the 3 E's and its relevance with our discussion topic for today, solving fundamental challenges. I would first like to begin with Mr. Banerjee. Mr. Banerjee, SIAM has been taking great initiatives when it comes to the education part. So over to you. Can you please shed some light on it?
Thank you, Mayank, and thank you, Autocar Professional, for giving SIAM this opportunity, my fellow panelists and ladies and gentlemen. Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers, representing the automobile industry of all vehicle category, 2-wheeler, 3-wheeler, 4-wheeler, passenger cars, truck, buses. We are proud to contribute in growth of India's story, and in its wake of growth with mobility rising, the road safety menace is actually concerning all of us. If you look at the statistics, we have 1% of the global vehicle population in the country, but we contribute more than actually 11% on fatalities. So this is a very alarming number, and this alarming number of fatalities coming along with it, the injuries, which is also actually making or maiming the people in large number. I'm told as per the statistics of NCRB, nearly 5 lakh people are actually getting disabled. So it's a huge loss, 3% to 4% of GDP loss is happening. And the vulnerable user sections, particularly the 2-wheeler users and the young group, 25 to 35, are the large, sufferers, which is actually, in fact, impacting the entire economic growth and the development of the nation. So therefore, it's very, very important for us. And this particular road safety conclave is very topical, pertinent, and useful. With this 3E focusing on the enforcement, education, and engineering, we have also, of course, the emergency care, but emergency care is not the subject of discussion today. But as far as the 3E goes, SIAM has been actually engaged with Government of India for a very long time. And we are very proud to present to you that today we can look back in hindsight, the efforts put in by the entire engineering community with the support of Government of India. Indian vehicles are at par or better than the developed countries' vehicles. But at the same time, when we are talking about the technology availability and deployment of a technology for making a safer vehicle, It is primarily focusing on the occupant safety, but at the same time, we have to make sure that vulnerable road users, pedestrians are also equally protected. So with primary, um, learning and experience of European country, which are mainly the four-wheeler car based experience they have, our unique, requirement of mobility, 80% of our vehicle sale of the 2 crore vehicles sold are actually two-wheelers. So SIAM has actually started an initiative called Surakshit Safar. In English, it translates Safe Journey, where we have recognized that having achieved the engineering of the vehicle to a satisfactory level, where we also have to be mindful of the affordability of the mobility solutions so that the mobility reach to the greater masses and the penetration of the mobility is made available to everyone. The enforcement and education is taking a center stage. And that's the reason the SIAM leadership has decided, along with the Ministry of Road Transport and Ministry of Education, we are planning to actually embark upon a 9-module system for the primary, secondary, and middle school students, wherein we will be teaching them the basics of road safety gears related knowledge of helmet and safety belts, and also Good Samaritan law related benefits, which we intend to give it to the secondary school. So Surakshit Safar Safe Journey is one initiative we have launched during the Auto Expo. We had also interacted with the state governments in the past. The next interaction will be with Maharashtra state in the month of June. So basically, transport is in the concurrent list where it is in center and state, both sides it is residing. So therefore, educating public, educating students, catching them young, and sensitizing them about the education of the rules, regulations, and the safe driving practices, that will help automatically the improvement on the enforcement front. So engineering, education, and enforcement. So if you ask me what is the most important criteria for taking the road safety initiative forward, then I would translate into education, education, education. Education only will bring enforcement, and automatically things will make a change in our system. And this is where I would like to stop. Back to you, Mike. Thank you.
No, absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Banerjee, for those remarks. And very right, I mean, the fundamental key thing is education. All of us must know how to drive on the roads and, what are the best practices that we need to follow on the roads. And you also mentioned about, vehicles, the technology getting improved in vehicles so much. And yesterday, we had a keynote address from Volvo's safety director, who mentioned about adopting a safe systems approach, wherein, the system involves not just the vehicle, but also safe roads and safe speeds. So with that, I would like to turn to Karuna. Karuna, with safe roads and safe speeds, so, we're talking about road engineering. And Save Life Foundation has been doing a lot of work when it comes to, identifying black spots on the roads and doing some tactical redesigns about some, redesigning some junctions to allow for smoother flow of traffic as well as motorists and pedestrians. So your thoughts about, the engineering aspect of the 3 E's that we are talking today.
Sure, Mayank. First of all, I would just like to thank you and thank Autocar for providing this platform to talk about such an important issue. While we are in the midst of UN Road Safety Week and the theme is sustainable mobility, I think it's the opportune time to talk about engineering, but also to talk about how we can make not just mobility sustainable, but safer. And keeping that in mind, our flagship program, the Zero Fatality Corridor Project, was started. Before I get into the details of program, I just wanted to quickly introduce Save Life and our work. Save Life has been working on the issue of road safety and emergency medical care since 2008. We were responsible for institutionalizing or advocating for the Good Samaritan law. And since 2015, our flagship program, the Zero Fatality Corridor Program, we have been adopting dangerous highways or high fatality highways across the country to make them to get them to near zero levels. And engineering is one of the most important pillars of that whole program. Like you mentioned, the safe systems approach. That is also a philosophy which we follow, but we also Indianize it to sort of use it in an Indian context. So the idea is that even if the road infrastructure is such that it is not up to the mark, yet people should not die because of that. So the system should be forgiving enough for people to not lose their lives. And as part of that, one of the most important things which we do is we collect data. So all our programs, whether it is a tactical redesign of an intersection or if it is a 100-kilometer stretch of Mumbai-Pune Expressway, the idea is to first collect data in terms of what is causing these crashes, what are the key sort of areas which need attention. And this is done by way of different audits. So we do crash vulnerability audits, which look at engineering factors or gaps in engineering factors. We like to audit roads against the IRC guidelines, but also against international guidelines, which would help make roads safer. And after identifying the gaps in these particular areas, we then propose to our government partners what changes or additions need to be made on these roads. So for example, with Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, we have adopted highways in 15 states, which have the highest burden of road crash deaths in India. Similarly, with Maharashtra government, UP, Assam, and Odisha, we have identified stretches of roads which are high fatality stretches. Again, to see how engineering measures and enforcement measures can be applied there to ensure reduction in road crash deaths. When it comes to tactical redesign, that's a process which helps us achieve quick, low-cost interventions to redesign intersections. So the idea is that if you don't have to wait for a year for a tender to come out to reduce the deaths on a particular intersection. So, for example, if I talk about Delhi, we have as of now changed or redesigned a lot of intersections on the outer ring road. So Bhalaspa intersection, Burari intersection. We collect data like speed data, turning movement data, and then look at how we can use paint, cones, and barriers to redesign that intersection and reduce the number of conflicts. So preemptively reduce the number of conflicts to therefore be able to reduce the number of road crashes and road crash deaths, which would be there. The idea overall with such an intervention is that we are able to also introduce modal equity. We are able to create sustainable mobility because when you create safe spaces for vulnerable road users like pedestrians, like cyclists, then you're also ensuring modal equity. Then you're also ensuring that they are safe while they're on road. And that also gives impetus for sustainable mobility. And therefore, the interventions which we have are not just helpful in ensuring that the deaths on that particular stretch are reduced, it also helps in ensuring overall sustainable mobility.
Absolutely. You know, if a junction allows for smoother flow of traffic, anyway, you are saving on fuel and, you know, there's less of wastage. And so I clearly understand that, you know, how such interventions are also aiding to sustainable mobility as well. And with that, we'll come to enforcement part. And Mr. Baijal, I will come to you for that. I mean, you're the best person to talk about enforcement with your, you know, hands-on experience being in the police. So your thoughts about, you know, what are the challenges when it comes to enforcement of the rules in India, and, you know, what needs to really improve there?
Thank you, Mayank. Actually, I have been much out of touch, you know, with the traffic department, because 2009 was the time when I left the department. But of course, my heart and soul was still in that, you know, because that's one department which deals with saving lives. A few initiatives on our part, you know, can make a huge difference, you know. I was still pained to read, you know, 3 days back, you know, that Maharashtra has lost around 15,000 lives last year. So where are we leading to? As far as the education part is concerned, long back, you know, almost a decade ago, I was suggesting that why don't you tap the insurance companies, you know, they are bleeding thousands and thousands of crores every year in paying the insurance amounts, you know, to all these accident victims. And we are absolutely nonchalant about it. So if that a sizable portion, even 1 or 2% of that thousands of crores, you know, is spent on educating the new drivers, you know, then maybe it will make a difference. Now, I used to always tell this, that ours was a hopeless generation, because no matter how much we educate them, we are not going to reform ourselves, because our mindset has become like that, So it's very difficult to change that. And now I regret to say this, that I am hopeless about the next generation also, because, when I see the school children being dropped to their schools, or to their colleges, by their parents who are driving on the wrong side. Just imagine, what the child is going to imbibe, he's going to imbibe, for him, or her, the mother or the father is the role model. So they feel, that their parents can do nothing wrong. So if my mother is driving on the wrong side, that means that is the right way, that you have to ride it. And that's how what he's going to continue when he becomes an adult, So that's why I say, I'm not very much positive about this generation also, unless we intervene right now. As far as the engineering part is concerned, we still do not provide for any east-west or north-south crossings, where the road is north-south or east-west. If you look back to 2007, there were just 5 east-west crossings on the entire stretch of Western Express Highway. When I was analyzing the number of fatalities, there were about 180 to 190 fatalities of pedestrians. I'm not talking about the car users, 180 lives were lost, because the people are trying to cross from east to west, they have to. Maybe they want to go to work, they want to go to college, they want to go to leisure, and then there's no provision for east-west crossing. Same was the case with Eastern Express Highway also. If you notice, as late as 2008 or 9, there was hardly a single foot overbridge on the entire stretch, And I feel ashamed to say this, that those foot overbridges came not because of convenience to pedestrians, they came because of a demand from the advertising agency. So where are we leading to? We are still, losing around 1.5 lakh lives every year on year. पिछले कई सालों से हम लाख 1.5 लाख जाने गंवा रहे हैं, and for us, it has just become a figure. We are absolutely immune to that. मरने दो, एक फिगर ऐड कर लो, कोई तो भी जाएगा वहां पे पंचनामा करेगा, इंश्योरेंस कंपनी उसका प्रीमियम ये जो भी है तो उसका सेटल कर लेगी क्लेम. So I am not very optimistic on that. The third count, is about enforcement. One effective method, to do that, is you focus on cancellation of licenses. You keep a track of repeat offenders and you just cancel them. When you do that, and make him, unable to drive for the entire life, throughout India, or for that matter, throughout the world, then the people will come to senses. These are all my views. They are very extreme. I know it, but yeah, they are the need of the hour.
Right. No, absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Bejal. And, you've touched upon some very critical things here and, what we've really observed over the years. And you're right, every year we are sort of losing around 150,000 lives. And this percentage of fatalities in total road accidents has been on the rise for the last 5 years. The last 5 years, around 35 to 36% is what the fatality rate is among total accidents in the country. So really, some serious interventions need to be coming there. And you mentioned about taking away the licenses and all. And therein, I would want to bring Karthik into the picture. Rose Murta is the biggest HSRP suppliers in India, and they're doing a lot of work in terms of automating the licensing processes. So they're the technology providers behind this automated driving test tracks. So Karthik, your thoughts about enforcement, how technology is sort of enabling enforcement as well as education overall when we talk about road safety.
Thank you, Mayank. I want to thank Autocar Professional and Mayank especially for having me on this distinguished panel. I also want to congratulate SIAM on their successful Surakshit Safar initiative. And I am sure that it is aimed at improving education and awareness on road safety. It is a very brilliant initiative that is going to have tremendous reach and impact from a grassroots level. So let me start off there. Now, when we talk about enforcement and education, I'll first start with education first. In education, the driving license regime right now is needing a lot many improvements. Even though the CMVR Rule 15 requires that, there are a lot of conditions that have been put for the candidates who are applying for a driving license. They need to know how to have certain driving skills. They need to have knowledge of the road rules. But right now, not many states are following those right now. A lot of what I can say is that I'm very optimistic because I can see change coming in a lot of states like Delhi, like Maharashtra, like Gujarat, that have started adopting the automatic driving test track scheme. We'll go on the technology a bit later, but I'm just going to give you a small example. Couple of days back, I read a statistic that in Mumbai, in 2022, 99.5% was the pass rate for driving license. Whereas the 6 centers that I'm running in Delhi on ATT operating in Delhi, in the last year and a half, I've done around 2 lakh tests. The pass rate is 65%. So I feel automating the training part and the testing part will go a lot further to improving and making our roads safer. If we talk about enforcement, one thing that is very crucial that has come up in the last 4 or 5 years is the integrated traffic management system, the ITMS products and solutions that are coming up. Because what is happening is we can improve road safety from a grassroots level by educating the people. But like Sir said, Mr. Bijay said that, he's aghast at what is happening, what the cultural mindset is of the existing generation. So that what we feel can only be changed by pinching them with their pocket, by chalaning them. So because of the HSRP scheme, there is a lot of online e-challans happening for the traffic violations, whether you're doing overspeeding, which is the leading cause of traffic accidents and traffic deaths, whether you're doing red light crossing, where you're doing lane changes. So all these traffic violations are now being captured by the ANPR camera, thanks to the HSRP standardization of the whole number plate because of the HSRP. And collector of online e-challans because of the depth of the implementation of the HSRP in Delhi. So I feel that once the HSRP has been implemented across India on all vehicles, you will see that the ITMS solutions will be able to help us make the road safer by issuing a lot of traffic violations, and the end customer, who is the public at large, who is the biggest stakeholder in all this that we are talking about. Once they also realize, they will be educated that if you keep doing this, this is you will get challaned. Like Sir said, that even more aggressive steps of, removing the driving license of repeat offenders, sending them to take training courses again, and then applying for a driving license again. Those are steps that we can think of once the ITMS solution is in place. Over to you, Mayank.
Right. So there really, a lot technology can do to enhance road safety going forward. And, as we are seeing, there's a slew of new technologies coming in, like you mentioned, ITMS and ANPR cameras. And in Delhi, just from an observational point of view, I can see, at places, at junctions wherein you have the red light monitoring cameras. So all the cars are standing behind the zebra crossing. And just, at a signal where there is no camera there, so you can see the chaos right there. So definitely, technology can do a lot to improve road safety. And coming back on education, like Mr. Banerjee told, that the fundamental thing boils down to education and education. So with that, Naresh, I come to you. You're doing a lot of work when it comes to the elementary education. You've written a couple of books about, these basic things that people should know when they are out driving on the roads. So your thoughts about this, and I think you also have some slides to share with us. So if you want to share some slides also, that's perfectly all right. And thank you once again for joining. It's very early morning for you in Chicago right now. So thank you once again.
Thank you, Mayank, for having me over, and thank you to Autocar Professional. I'm really privileged to be here, honored. And yeah, I just have a couple of slides I thought I'll share, to show my point. Give me a second. Wait a minute. Sorry. Yeah. So basically, you guys have been around in the space for a long time, and I'm relatively new in that sense. And so a little introduction about myself is like, I'm focusing on driver education, and basically I've written these books, and there are 2 flagship books: Car Driving School Manual for India, with, a whole chapter on 2-wheelers translated into other languages. And we also got a heavy vehicles driving manual translated into Telugu. So me and my co-author, Malcolm Wolf, we have written these books. And the reason we written this books is like, the same statistics that we were just talking about. 80% of the road accidents are due to driver error, according to Mark. So driver error means actually people don't know who has the right of way, and they don't know what is the right thing to do in a certain situation. So they take a risk and it ends up in an accident. So you guys can see my screen, right? I'm just going on.
Not really, Naresh. I mean, this is just a blank, so we're really unable
Oh.
to see your screen right now.
You're not able to see my screen? Oh, wait a minute. Let me just do that again.
Yeah.
I'm glad I asked.
No, I thought it was only me who wasn't able to, but yeah, I think there's some glitch there. So it says that you've started. Yeah, now we can see. Perfect.
Okay, so
Yeah,
I'm
perfect.
just back it up once. So this is the books that me and my co-author Malcolm we authored. So this is driving school manual for India with the whole section on two-wheelers is our flagship. And the book is completely based on CMVR 1989 Rule 31. And it also has all the 40 MVDR rules embedded into it wherever applicable. So it's designed for Indian conditions. And we also have a heavy vehicles manual, and then it's translated into some other languages. It's on Amazon and Flipkart. Basically, what inspired us to write this book is the same statistic that we're talking about, that over 80% of road accidents are due to driver error, right? And that means people don't know who has right of way. That is a elemental thing. So when you come onto a junction, also they don't know how to behave. So I'm going to just show you a couple of really small video clips to illustrate my point. And this is my underlying assumption, that a well-trained defensive driver is capable of driving safely in any traffic condition, any type of roadway, anytime, any weather. Now, of course, I'm not at all discounting the importance of good road engineering and good road technology, seat belts, airbags, enforcement. Everything is very important. But I feel, I know many people, and I'm sure you also know, maybe your father, maybe an uncle, maybe a relative who's been driving since 1970s, doesn't have an accident. How are they doing that? It's not magic, right? They've driven through Kacha roads, they've driven through like normal roads, and now they're driving on a 8-lane highway. Still, they don't have accidents. So I think there is a lot with operator themselves being aware of the limits of your vehicle and what is right and what is wrong. And, there is this 4 E's that we're talking about. This is my interpretation. This is the way I created something called the pyramid of road safety. And, there are 6 levels to it. The bottom 2 levels, I feel, are every person's individual responsibility, every citizen of India, really. This should not be something that should be forced or mandated. And like Mr. Paijal was saying, it's a mindset that needs to come about, that, the parents need to tell the child, hey, before I give you my car keys, you go learn the rules. If the parent imposes that and say, you're not getting the car keys till you learn the rules, then automatically the country changes. So, but I feel that right now, everybody wants to quickly get a license and start driving. But we need to focus on that, driver education, theory, defensive driving, then go on to practicing with an experienced driver. And then after that comes of the role of the RTA. And like Karthik was saying, yeah, the RTA's process is not so good right now. 99.5% get their licenses. Never happens anywhere in the world. According to that, Indians are the best drivers in the world. And then, we're talking about engineering, road design. And, I've just added the level 5 of, technology, because that also helps a lot on road safety nowadays. Airbags, ABS and lane departure. And finally, is like what Mr. Paijal was again saying, is enforcement, policing, fines, right? Right now, there are too many people breaking the rules. So it's almost impossible for the cops to catch everybody. See, like in the US, what I observe is like, I see someone breaking a rule maybe once in a month. Seriously, when I'm driving through, once in a month, I see somebody running a light or jumping a stoplight, and everybody knows that person is making the mistake. And so there's a very good chance they'll get caught. But in India, maybe more like, 10, 20% break the rules. So you can't catch so many, right? We have like, 20 crore drivers. So I'll just show you this particular example, because why driver education is so important. This is just a side road people are trying to turn right from a side road to a main road. They all go to the right side of the road. Even the car, it turns to the right side of the road. And they're honking, they have to yield actually. The cyclist is blocked there. So this person is the only person I noticed who stopped, yielded to traffic, looked both sides, and joined from the left side of the road to the left side of the main, roadway. So this is just one problem that is plaguing our roads, I think all over India, because I posted this on my Twitter and people said, oh, this happens in Delhi, that happens in Bangalore too, this happens in everywhere. So I feel like just a 30-second clip like this can educate a lot of people to say, oh, I didn't know that. Is that the way you're supposed to turn it? And here's another example that, I have only 2 videos. So this one is again, what is the meaning of a solid center line? When the center line becomes solid, you should not cross it. There is a particular reason for it, right? Sorry about that. Nobody was seriously injured in that accident. But so I'm just trying to make the point that how much of advancements we make in technology, end of the day, if the human operator doesn't even know the most basic rules, we cannot do anything much. And, so we need to do some kind of driver education on a war footing level. That is the only way we're going to change it. And the good thing about India is like, I've noticed, this is my personal observation, that people are good with motor skills. They can drive in small gaps and they can negotiate all kinds of obstacles which people abroad will not even attempt. So we are good on the driving aspects of it. What we are poor on is the rules in the defensive driving. So my idea, which I've come up, thinking about is like, how about like a 2-hour educational video, with just video clips like this, like what I showed you, put some, and then that can teach just key road rules. Let's not try to make PhDs out of our drivers. Right now, they're at level 1. Even if we get them to level 6 on a scale of 1 to 10, I think we'll be doing the nation a favor. And there are 1,100 RTAs over the country. We just need to set up 1,100 little training centers powered by NGOs and CSR funds. So, but I'll stop here. I don't want to go any more into this. Just wanted to put that idea out there, and over to you, Mayank.
Right. No, absolutely, Naresh. You sort of hit the spot. And this is sort of my observation as well, that people are really good at maneuvering a vehicle, but hardly do they know about the rules and how to go about driving safely on our roads. So that's the key element. It boils down fundamentally to education. And Mr. Banerjee, so, like Naresh mentioned that, around 1,100 RTOs across the country. And, we should sort of ensure that, each and every one driver who goes to get a license should sort of first get educated about, the basic rules of how to behave on our roads. So how do you think this could be made possible, as SIAM, as the automotive industry? Can the industry really, step in and do some sort of, an elevated work in terms of, like Naresh suggested, some CSR initiatives or something? Because clearly, despite it being there out, the plague is still there, the effectiveness is not really there. So how do we go about it?
So, Mang, I think it's exciting to see that a lot work independently being done by different entities. And I'm very excited to see what Naresh is doing. Because as I mentioned that as part of our Surakshit Safar, we have curated actually 9 modules, each for middle, primary and secondary school. So I'll anyway touch base with Naresh and try to see his experience and knowledge, how it can be, included in our curriculum building, including the video-based teaching and training material development.
My
But
pleasure.
Standing Government of India is very clear, and IDTR concept has already been notified. Huge amount of funding has been actually Nirbhaya fund, what was there as part of that. It's already created for the driver training center to state. So there is a good amount of 50% funding is being released by Government of India for IDTRs, and we have different state government interactions. So only day before yesterday, we had a meeting with Minister of Transport UP, wherein the 14 districts of UP have been identified where they are seeking for IDTR related support from SIAM. And SIAM members, as you are aware that we have 45 members total. We have actually 12 two-wheeler manufacturers. So if I to speak on Honda or Hero or Bajaj, TVS, Royal Enfield, everywhere what we are doing is that we have a simulator. So whosoever is being sold two-wheelers, actually he is taught on the simulator the basics of the driver training. Also, there are institutes in Delhi, for example, we have a Honda supported driver training institutes, we have Hero supported driver training institutes. So across the country, wherever possible, actually our membership is actually creating driver training. As regards the heavy duty vehicle driver training, Ashok Leyland, Tata, Eicher, they have very dedicated 12, 15, 30 institutes, because it takes a large area and very dedicated specific infrastructure. So it has been created. So in Odisha itself, you see Ashok Leyland has 4, the total Tata Motor has more than 12 institutes. So IDTR for cars, IDTR for heavy commercial vehicle, IDTR for two-wheelers are being developed with the support from member companies. And we are very excited that government of India, along with the state government, is very willing to support. So what UP was offering is that the land which they will give, the civil infrastructure they will give, it's a matter of only creating kind of running and operational support, the teacher support, the staff support can be given by CSR fund of industry. So we are working actually 360-degree how we can expand this. So we have a 648 odd districts in the country. And what we are doing is that each district should have some kind of driver training institute. And every OEM is being encouraged that when you sell a vehicle, you do sensitize people about the basics of the driving rules. And wherever possible, they are creating simulators and educating. So SIAM, under the Surakshit Safa, we have already started the CSR fund collection and using that fund for the general education and awareness creation as part of the road safety education and improvement activities, particularly driver training. But for example, Shroff Eye Clinic, we also focus on drivers' eye checkup.
Right.
Many of the drivers are colorblind.
Yeah.
So we are trying to actually ensure 360-degree education and interventions so that the road safety menace can be contained. If not, it is completely eliminated. Thank you.
Right. So Mr. Bejal, I'll come to you with that. Like Mr. Banerjee said, the manufacturers are doing their bit in some sense. So how do you think can this be implemented? I mean, like we were discussing, in Maharashtra itself, more than 99% of the applicants are getting passed in their driving license test. So how do you think we can really correct this thing? I mean, is there a structure? Can we bring in a structured process wherein, you have to first go attend some classes, then apply for a learner's license, and then eventually come to give your main driving license test?
And the system is like that only right now. I mean, you apply today, you will get your driving license test, call after 6 months.
Right.
All the systems are in place. The systems are good, but then the implementation is not good. I mean, just imagine why only 1 or 2% of these applicants, for driving licenses, they are rejected. I mean, are we so smart, that I was a part of United Nations peacekeeping mission in Kosovo way back in 2004. I mean, I have been driving since the age of almost, 17, 18. So, in spite of that, I was failed thrice. 3 times I failed their test, in United Nations peacekeeping mission. Yeah. And then finally I got passed, but then what do we do here? We look at it as a source of revenue.
Yeah.
More number of licenses that we issue, the more number of the more revenue is generated. We need to stop looking at that as a revenue generating machinery. Secondly, you can do some sting operation over there. Go to some RTO and find out, whether the driving tests are really conducted. What is the percentage of clearing licenses by every officer? On an average, one officer is issuing 40 to 50 test compliances every day. I had broken down the number of hours that he's putting in every day or every week, every month, and then divide that by the number of tests, that he's doing, It was shocking, hardly 1.5 to 2 minutes. So are we doing justice to that? No.
Right. Right.
For Karuna, I just have one request, that whenever the engineering factor is taken into consideration, especially on the highways, many people are driving on the wrong side because there are no the crossings, on the roads, So if we at the construction stage itself, at every village or every sort of habitat, even for one person or 10 persons also, if we can provide east-west crossing or a subway over there, then this driving on the wrong side, that will be eliminated, because we are losing lives on that also. The person who is driving on the right side, he's suffering because he is going further on the road, on the main road, and he is exposing himself, more to the traffic which is coming from behind, which he can't see. Whereas the person who is coming from the wrong side, he can see the oncoming traffic, and he is taking cover from the person who is coming on the right side.
Yeah.
So this is ridiculous, I mean, I experience this when I'm cycling on long distance trips, So there I am exposing myself, being on the right side. So if this can be taken into consideration at the construction level itself, And the third, for the manufacturers, I don't know, this is very hypothetical, but I feel, that almost 30 to 40% of accidents can be avoided if we learn to use the rear view mirror in the right way.
Oh, absolutely.
How many people sit in the car and adjust their mirrors? कोई नहीं है. अगर मतलब कोई और काम के लिए वो यूज में आ जाएगा, कंघी वंगी करने के लिए या फिर वो बाल सेट करने के लिए, टायर सेट करने के लिए, बट पीछे से आने वाला ट्रैफिक देखने के लिए इट्स हार्डली यूज्ड, so it can be somehow made more prominent, or there can be some blinkers, put in by them. I don't know how technology can be put used to that, अगर ये कर सके तो मुझे लगता है कि काफी सारे एक्सीडेंट्स प्रिवेंट हो सकते हैं. I would, differ on the enforcement part of it, because that should be the last priority for us, that should be the last priority. We are dealing with, 150 crore people, we are talking about them, and there are at least, 20 crore people who are having licenses, What is the force we have got? Mumbai, we are dealing with almost 2 crore floating population per day. और कितने लोग हैं वहाँ पे ट्रैफिक में? 3,500 से 4,000 लोग हैं. हर एक इंसान को भी अगर चालान करने चालू करूँ अगर रोज के हिसाब से, तो भी मुश्किल से 6 या 7,000 चालान होते हैं. ऐसे करते करते 70-80 साल लग जाएंगे मैं ये सब करते करते. So the more emphasis should be put on education part of it. Thank you, man.
Right. Well, I'll take that to Naresh. Once again, I'll come to you before I go to Karuna. And, so what can we learn from, you've been trained by the NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration of the US. So what can we learn from these, safe practices that are part of the defensive driving training?
So, I've been trained by the Motorcycle Safety Foundation also, and they actually have an audiovisual course, and honestly, there's a lot of learning you can get from sitting on a 2-hour course. And I'm a believer in that because I feel that there's so much that I learned from there. I mean, besides the other books that I read and, learned myself, but I feel like the power of audio visual of someone, sitting down and watching a movie. It's not someone talking with a PowerPoint, because that is kind of boring. People lose this thing. I think it has to be very exciting with all these videos, and people like to see, sorry to say, they like to see gory accident videos. Not necessarily gory, at least accident videos.
Right.
So I feel like a good program which shows the good and the bad, correct way to do it, and What happens if you don't do it? You get, I showed you like one of each, right?
Yeah.
And maybe my example was a little, the second one was a little, extreme. But what I'm trying to say is that we can create an audiovisual program, which, you can have everybody watch it and learn from it. And this should be outside of RTA because, right, just like Mr. Baijal said, and others have also said, RTA already has a system. So
Right.
if we try to interfere into that system, we will all fail. Nobody can change that system. Okay. So we need to be a step outside the system and say, hey, once you get your driver's license, RTA should mandate saying, go to this NGO foundation, attend this course. They will give you a test. Only if you pass it, you come back here. Then the rest of the procedure goes on in the RTA itself.
Right.
So we are not taking anything away from the RTA. We're just adding one external step into that. And as doing the numbers for it, we are issuing, I think, 1.10 crore licenses in a year.
Yeah.
Across 1,100 RTAs, that's like 10,000 per year per location. And that comes down to something like average of 33 or 34 licenses per day. So training 34 people a day, it's not a big
challenge.
deal at
Yeah,
all. Yeah, it's very, very
absolutely.
manageable. So we need to look at this out of the box kind of thing to say that, okay, well, what does it cost? It doesn't cost much to set up a center. It's like maybe at 25 lakhs to run a small training center, 1,500 square feet. And so even if you multiply that by 1,100, it's like 275 crores. So we're not talking about big numbers when the central government budget is 1 lakh crores. We're talking about a piddly, drop in the ocean.
Absolutely.
But I think somewhere we got to make a start, because I think a lot of our panelists have been also talking about the behavioral aspect, right? So we need to also behaviorally tell them that, hey, this is wrong. You cannot say Mera Bharat Mahan, have the flag, and then drive on the wrong side. It doesn't work that way. You got to instill that somewhere in that training program to say, hey, you should feel proud about following the rules. Don't follow the guys who are breaking the rules, So a little behavioral change, a little bit of training, and I think we can get this thing under control in the next 5 to 10 years. That's my belief.
Right. Karuna, I'll come to you with that, what Naresh has just mentioned, NGOs like yours, and independent organizations like Life Foundation. So not just, interventions in terms of the redesigns of some of the critical bottlenecks which we see on the roads, but also, are you guys doing something beyond that in terms of, education, like Naresh mentioned, these courses which could be beyond the RTO test, so that, that's the first step for a new driver to sort of get himself well versed about the nuances of driving and then approach the RTO for getting his license?
I think beyond that, I think one of the things which is important, which we are looking at is when we look at implementation of laws, then improving the awareness of those laws, because a law is only as good as its implementation. So when earlier we were looking at the Good Samaritan law and trying to figure out how bystanders who help road crash victims, how they can be protected from legal and procedural hassles. And that was way back in 2012 that we started that work around that, and we realized that around about 88% of people did not help road crash victims because of procedural and legal hassles. And over the years, when the Good Samaritan law was institutionalized, we realized only 16% of people know their rights.
Okay.
Similarly, with the Motor Vehicle Amendment Act, which has been enacted in 2019, and which has a lot of rights which have been given to road users there. So while we are talking about enforcement of certain risk factors by people, for example, non-usage of seat belts or helmets, there are also a lot of rights which have been given to road users in the MVA. It's also the lack of awareness about those as well, not just on part of road users, but I think also on road owning agencies, as well as with maybe some enforcement officials. So, for example, last year there was a notification by ministry which said that children also have to wear helmets, and parents who are carrying children on two-wheelers must only drive at 40 kilometers per hour. And there's a front page story today in Mumbai basically saying that a lot of cops were not aware of that particular rule. So if you're not aware of it, how are you going to enforce it? And if I flip that argument as a road user, if you're not aware of what will keep you and your children safe, how are you going to sort of then change your behavior? So importance of these risk factors, I think, well, what Naresh was also speaking about in terms of A, of course, telling people how to drive, but I think B, also telling them what are these risk factors which are A, global, but B, also inherently Indian. So while WHO recognizes non-usage of seatbelts, non-usage of helmets, non-usage of child restraint systems, and speeding as risk factors, like Mr. Bejul said, wrong side driving is a huge factor in India. It's a huge risk factor, and the mortality and morbidity burden due to that is also huge. So we do need to address these situations, but we also need to inform the road users about the impact they have. Because somewhere the road user also has this optimism bias that it will not happen to them. It does happen to people around us in our lives. I'm sure all of us know someone within our families or extended families who has met a road crash. So it is important to be aware of these factors while we are, driving on roads, and also it's important to know the science behind it. There is science behind each of these factors. There's science behind why helmets need to be used and why child restraint systems need to be used. So I think education at that level is also important to also acquaint the drivers who are currently on road, but also future drivers about these points as well.
Right.
Aruna, to bypass the seat belts, we have come up with clips.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And now the
That's
ministry had to issue notification
Yes.
asking, a lot of
So
companies.
our
to not
mindset is
follow.
more on breaking the rule than following it. I just want to take a minute. I have started one NGO here in Nasik, that is Nasik Cyclist Foundation, and I started with 8 people way back in 2012. Today, I have around 4,000 members, who are registered with the Nasik Cyclist Foundation. And out of that, Mayank, on an average, about 30 to 40% are cycling every day, either to work or to pleasure or to college, school, whatsoever. So I have faced this menace, as Karuna said about wrong side driving, that's a huge thing, because you are busy, your head is down, you're thinking, enjoying your ride, and suddenly someone comes from the front, unawares. And then you go to the right, without seeing what is coming from behind. So I am planning on a campaign, a very simple campaign. I am not going to offend the person who is going to come from the wrong side. I'm not going to penalize him, or I'm not even going to challan him whatsoever. I'll just say one small gesture, with my left hand, just like that, and this I have been doing for the last 15 days, and I noticed, one particular road I go every day from Nasik to Trambakeshwar. So then when I started doing this, initially their reaction was कि ये क्या कर रहा है ये? फिर बाद में they realized कि यार अरे ये अपने को इशारा कर रहा है कि भाई तुम गलत साइड से चल रहे हो. So then 2 out of 10, they will feel ashamed, कि यार अपन गलत कर रहे हैं. So the second or the third day, they may stop coming, on the wrong side, So this I am planning to just, disseminate to all our 4,000 members. Let's see, I mean, that's some sign of hope. अगर मतलब मान लो अगर 5%, 10% भी अगर हम change ला सके, अगर एक भी जान बचा सके, तो I think our effort would have been worthwhile. Over, Mayank.
Absolutely. No, before I go to Karthik, Naresh, you have something to add?
No, I was just going to add to what Mr. Baijal said, that, public shaming doesn't exist in India, sir. What you said is very right. In the US, when someone makes a mistake and someone honks, everybody turns and look. That person feels ashamed.
Right.
In India, people are driving on the wrong side and everybody accepts it. So your one gesture, actually, you're right. The power of that gesture is great. Because I also try to do that. I never get into arguments and fights with anyone. Wrong side drivers, I ask them, why are you driving like this? You can get into accident, you can get me into an accident. So yeah, I'm with you on that, sir. Go ahead.
Thank
No,
you.
absolutely.
Thank you.
And I also want to bring another aspect here, Mr. Bejal, before I go to Karthik. So not just public shaming, but also empathy. Do you think that empathy also plays a huge role here? Like if you have caught an offender, rather than challaning him, if you at that point in time sort of make him understand the importance of maybe wearing a helmet or not driving on the wrong side, would that really go a long way as well?
Surely, I was posted as superintendent of police in Gondia. That's a tribal district, and then
Okay.
there is no awareness about helmets and seat belts, I mean, we say in Maharashtra, the sun rises in Gondia, for Maharashtra, that is the easternmost district. Zero awareness about helmets, Then when I started this campaign, there was no shops, who were selling helmets. So firstly, I had to provide that, Then, I mean, I found out that most of them are poor, So then I started giving them an option, Of course, it was not in my ambit. It was not in my powers also. But somewhere, I said, my conscience said, I'm not doing anything wrong, As long as I'm doing it for the good of the people, it's okay. I gave them an option, wherever my people, we set up chowkis, maybe around 25 to 30 chowkis, for enforcement. We used to catch them, keep their bike with us, give them an option. Either you pay the fine or you go and buy an helmet. So buying a helmet was a better option, The fine was 500 rupees, 750 or 800 rupees, he used to buy a helmet. अब वो सर्कुलेट करते थे, दूसरे को देते थे, वो सब बातें, जुगाड़ अपना इंडियन मेंटालिटी है, वो सब करते रहते थे. बट उसमें उस चक्कर में क्या हुआ कि कुछ तो हेलमेट्स वहां पे बिके, कुछ हेलमेट्स वहां पे लोग चालू करे यूज करना. And the saddest part was my own people were not using helmets, So I started challenging them. In 1 week, I challenged around 300 policemen for not wearing helmets. जो पुलिस लाइन से, पुलिस लाइन के बाहर ही अपना मेरा चेक पोस्ट लगा देते थे. जो भी बाहर आया उसको चालान करने का. Even in SRP also, at the main entrance gate, we used to put कि अंदर किसी को अलाउ ही नहीं करना है कि जो हेलमेट पहन के नहीं आ रहा है. But that is a very crude way. किसके लिए कर रहे हैं आप? मेरे लिए कर रहे हैं आप? पुलिस के लिए कर रहे हैं? किसके ऊपर एहसान कर रहे हैं आप? You are doing it. You are wearing that helmet or the seat belt, for safeguarding your own life. एहसान कर रहे हैं. उनको लगता है कि भाई हमने फाइन भरा 300-400 रुपए, तो ट्रैफिक पुलिस की पगार हो गई उसमें से. तो माइंडसेट बदलना बहुत जरूरी है सर.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Karthik, I'll come to you now, and I have two questions for you. One is, like how Naresh had mentioned earlier, about having these extended courses. And since you are already tying up with a lot of RTOs, so, do you think some independent organizations can step in to sort of have these curriculum modules so that, a new driver can first get thorough in terms of, the literature and, doing not straight away going into the practical part of driving, but first, getting the knowledge and then eventually applying for a license. And the second thing I want to ask you about, part of education is also, being aware of maintaining your vehicle. So, people don't really care about the tire pressure, they're not really bothered about whether their lights are functioning, the indicators are working well or not. So all these aspects, because you as Rosmerta, you're also supplying these, you have these vehicle maintenance facilities, if I'm not wrong. So your thoughts on these two questions, please.
So I'll answer the first question first. Regarding the training module. So government has come up with ADTC programs also, which is automatic driving training centers. So what the concept and what the idea behind it is, before the customer or the candidate who's applying for a driving license should go for a 29 or a 34-hour course, both practical and theory,
right,
which will be spread over a few weeks, wherein he's aware of the driving skills and the rules and what the basic signages mean, so that he can actually follow those rules in practical when he's, giving the driving license and he has achieved the driving license. So these sort of concepts are already live with the government, and we are also working with a lot of other companies, private players, to form such courses. And not only at the RTO level, like SIAM is doing at the education at the elementary level, which is the schools, then we are doing it at the driving at the stage of driving license issuance. I feel it should be a lot of the responsibility of all the corporates also to give these 2-hour videos as a refresher course training to all their employees, who are driving bikes, who are driving cars. So that way the education and the awareness is disseminated at all levels. At the complete elementary level, I still remember when I was in school, I was given training not for cars but for bicycles. What to check. I still remember. It is still imparted to me. It was maybe 25 odd years back, and I still remember what to check, how to do the cycle training. So if that way we are given, basic instructions and basic rules for driving license, And at the same time, those are reinforced to us at the time of issuance of a driving license. And then they're again reinforced to us when we are, working for private organizations. I think that will, keep the focus on road safety and driving in a safer manner.
The course that you mentioned, is it live? If at least in
It is
Delhi?
it is going to be live soon. It is going to be live.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Bajaj.
I think I had one extreme thought on this, since most of these automobile manufacturers, they just produce vehicles, and then they say, this is not our baby, coming out with responsible drivers is not our baby. If we start pinching the issuing of driving licenses, if even there is a 50% drop, in the number of licenses that are issued every day, I'm just talking about a 50% drop. That will pinch the automobile manufacturers, and then each dealer, each manufacturer has got his distributor network in most of the towns, Like what Mr. Karthik was telling, कि अगर ये उनके dealership के ऊपर अगर ऐसा education center वहाँ पे चालू कर सके, they will have to find the place, they will have to find the resources for doing that. Because finally it is their baby. They have to own this, this menace, they have to own that, and then rectify that. अगर गाड़ी अगर रोड के ऊपर नहीं आ रही है तो ये सब चीजें कम होगी, मतलब नहीं होगी ऐसी बात नहीं, पर कम होगी. But उनको मतलब they should be made accountable. That's my thought.
Right. Mr. Banerjee, you want to rebut that? I mean, I'm sure it's not possible to have a training center set up at each and every one of the dealerships or showrooms. But, overall, you mentioned that, there's this IDTR concept, which is being contributed by the industry. So your answer to what Mr. Bajaj has just mentioned.
As you know that a very, very robust for all vehicle category IDTR cost around 25 crore, 20 to 25 crore. And that's the reason, because the investment is very high. It has been decided that we will have a 3-layered IDTRs created across the country. So one is which is catering to say 2-wheelers, another one is for 4-wheelers cars, and another one is catering to the heavy-duty vehicles as well. So with this 3-layered approach, I think we will be able to reach pan-India. Of course, such a big investment cannot happen in every district. And even if you do the investment for the viability and health of that IDTR, it is important that we should have enough vehicles coming in as part of the intention of the government, how to popularize these IDTRs and how to mandate it without actually antagonizing the well-settled, well-oiled RTO systems. So therefore, RTOs also needs to be brought on board. So it's a very complex Indian democratic system-based process where we need to see the improvement. So technology intervention, like Karthik mentioned, that they have a great experience that how camera-based monitoring systems are perhaps doing better now. So most of the IDTRs are now adopting camera-based monitoring systems. Human interventions have to be avoided so that automatically computer-generated results should come in. Also, there could be possibility of 2-3 layers of preparatory courses wherein people can sitting at home can reach out, and then once they come, the chances of failures, because that sheer number of requirement of driving training is so much that if you mandate any kind of prerequisite, you will have a huge long queue, and then you will have people not driving the vehicle for want of availability of driving license. So it has to be balanced. Actually, it's a kind of a very complex supply chain demand requirement wherein you have less number of facilities, but at the same time trainers are not there, same time officials are having different priority interest in different RTOs. Every state government willingness is also at a different level. So all in all, actually, I believe that every one of us have recognized that this road safety menace cannot be managed with individual organization or individual government interventions. It has to be collective wisdom and collective support and effort of all the stakeholders in our society. And with this more and more, education and conclave like this, people are getting sensitized, and they are also taking their share of responsibility and making this initiative, more meaningful, and younger generations are more actually responsible when it comes to basically achieving the benefit of road safety education. So I'm sure that we should not lose heart, and we should remain optimistic that we will be able to populate these driving training concepts more and more in time to come in different parts of the country.
And is the younger generation, Mr. Banerjee, sort of accepting this fact? They want this, I mean, a process-oriented training. They want to be trained in a process-oriented fashion compared to what we've seen, you know, in the past, that there's a guy he has a car, and, you know, he's authorized from the government to make you learn. But, you know, if you go to a Maruti run IDTR, I think the process is completely different there. So, I mean, are you observing a shift in the mindset of the end user as well?
Oh yes, I think younger generation are more sensitive to, because of the complete opening up of the information through the Google, web, social media. So I think they are much more aware than our generation. That most of the problems you see today on road is because of the generation we have been part of, a very indisciplined one, and aspiration to grow. So we have mindlessly grown to this level, wherein we, in its wake, we have left this menace of road safety. So younger generation is very mindful of their social responsibility, not only to the extent what carbon footprint they leave when they move from one place to another, and the better asset utilization point of view, not to own the car rather than own the service. But at the same time, they are also equally getting sensitive, because when I go to schools, I am told that once the pledge is taken by the child, he will make sure at home, even if parents say that, you do this, that does not matter. They say, no, I have taken the pledge.
Yeah.
So therefore, young minds are always, very pure mind, and they make huge difference in the society. So whatever challenge you see is because of the lack of education we had when we grew up. But this new generation will definitely be benefited with the, intention of giving them and imparting them education at the right age.
Right. Naresh, is that also what you are observing as well? You are active as an independent, as an independently, you're quite active even on social media. You're doing a lot of these campaigns. So are you also observing a shift in the psyche of the end users? I mean, they want to sort of, learn a formal training of how to, drive better on our roads?
Yes, definitely. My Twitter following is slowly increasing, and what I found is there is definitely an awareness. Just like Mr. Banerjee said, because of social media, people are now realizing, oh, there are some rules that I really need to learn. This is a mindset change itself. And like, for instance, in the past, the attitude of a regular, let's say an Indian, was that just like how I get my Aadhaar card, I should get my driver's license.
Yeah.
I have a right to it. No, a driver's license, you don't have a right to it. You have to earn it. It's like, passing a 10th or anything like that. So we gotten used to that over the years, that automatically I have to get the license. There's no chance that I don't get it, And so I was actually in Dubai for a couple of years. And like Mr. Baijal was saying, he was relating another experience that I failed my first driving test in Dubai too. And that's when I realized there's a lot to this whole road safety rules than what you think. We are right at the periphery, and we think there are like 5-10 rules. No, they are a little bit more, maybe 30-40, And so coming back to your question, yes, the younger generation now goes to YouTube, sees videos, and then they're coming to me and following me and learning some new things. So definitely awareness is building, but unfortunately that is still limited to the urban elite. The people who are on Twitter itself are like 0.001% of the.
Absolutely.
So we need to get that out to government schools, roll it out as a program. And like, Mr. Banerjee was saying, Surakshit Safar, right? Yeah. We need to get things like that out to the grassroots level. And like Mr. Baijal said, young minds accept very fast and they change. And once it gets set in your head, like, you will never drive on the wrong side, So like I've seen in the US, like people, for instance, the moment even a kid gets in, they go for the seatbelt.
Yeah.
It's so involuntarily.
Yeah.
It has become involuntary. It's not that, oh, there's a beep, I have to put the seatbelt. No, the moment they're talking, and then they put on the seatbelt. So that's how we should get into that. And if we catch them young, we can achieve that, because 20 crore existing drivers in India, but 1 crore only issued every year. So let's leave the 19 crore aside. Let's start with the 1 crore every year. They're young. We can probably
Absolutely.
make a change
Absolutely.
in, period of time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, Mr. Vajri. You're on mute. You need to unmute yourself, please. Yeah.
I just want to mention one incident that happened with my son. This was 2007, and I had celebrated his 6th birthday at the traffic park in Conclave. So he was a student of Bombay Scottish, and I had taken his entire class, to the traffic park. And then there we have 2 dedicated constables, who, first of all, who enlighten the children on all the rules, be it a 6-year-old child or a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old. So they will explain all the rules to them. And then after that, we have toy cycles over there. So we get practicals done from them. कि आधा घंटा वो साइकिल के ऊपर या जो भी टॉय कार्स है वो चलाएंगे, and they will follow all the traffic rules which have been taught to them in half an hour back. बर्थडे पार्टी हो गया उसका, उसके बाद में 6 महीने 1.5 महीने के बाद में he just said कि he again wants to go to that park. So only me and him. I mean, I just want to enlighten on what Mr. Raghavan mentioned, young minds. तो महीने के बाद में वो बोला कि आज वापस जाने का है, वहाँ पे मुझे साइकिल चलाना है. तो I took him there, only me, him. He was riding busy and I was busy talking on the phone. So आधा घंटा होने के बाद में जब उसका दिल भर गया, तो उसने बाद में जब हम निकलने के लिए बाहर आ रहे थे, just imagine, that 6-year-old brat, he's telling me कि पापा आपने 3 रूल तोड़े. 6-year-old child, he's telling me कि पापा आपने 3 रूल तोड़े. बोला कौन से रूल तोड़े? तो बोले पहला रूल, बोले जब मेरा सिग्नल ग्रीन था तब आपने रोड क्रॉस किया. मेरा सिग्नल जब ग्रीन था तब आपने रोड क्रॉस किया. सेकंड वाला बोले कि आपने रोड जो है तो जेब्रा क्रॉसिंग के ऊपर नहीं क्रॉस किया, आपने बीच में से ही क्रॉस कर लिया. The third violation was you were talking on the mobile.
No, absolutely. I mean, we keep seeing these are sort of part of our day-to-day observations. You step out of your home and within 5 minutes in India, you would find at least 10, 15 blatant errors being committed by different drivers or riders on the road. And Karuna, I'll come to you, talking about these interventions that you're doing. So about pedestrian safety as well as two-wheeler rider safety, they are the most vulnerable people out there on the roads. So your interventions, what is the acceptance level or what is the response from the authorities once you sort of propose such a redesign? How long does it take, and do the authorities really do any implementation of those suggestions that you propose?
For most of the redesigns which we propose, we work with government authorities. And also the idea is that we also work with communities. So the redesign is also discussed with them so that it also makes sense, for their own reality. Because many times if you propose a foot-over bridge, the pedestrian may not be accepting of that particular idea in terms of the design. They would want something at eye level for them to be able to cross the road. So one of the most important sort of tenets for us is to work with the community and work with the stakeholders. So whether that's the public works department or whether that's the transport department or the police department, to work with them to see how that redesign is shaping. And we have received support from all the various departments in terms of the temporary measures. And we look forward to working with them to make those measures permanent, because the idea is that we are able to reduce the deaths in the short term through these tactical measures, but be able to show to them how that redesign works, and therefore how to redesign that in the sort of, in the larger context. So for example, if Delhi Transport Department comes out with a list of 30 black spots in the city, which contribute to a number of deaths in the city, that if these are redesigned in a permanent manner, then they won't remain as black spots. So a black spot sees, let's say, anything above 5, or 7 deaths in a year. So if you're able to eliminate those deaths by way of redesigning these intersections, then that also gives a good sort of model to the city to do that at scale and to ensure that at least engineering related errors on roads are reduced.
Right. And are you also doing any work in the rural, in the hinterlands as well? I mean, have you reached those levels so as to eliminate these black
So
spots
we
or
are
some
working
interventions there?
on highways which pass through, for
Okay.
example, the old Mumbai-Pune highway passes through a
Right.
lot of villages. So yes, the idea is to work on the highways which are in the vicinity of rural areas, because
Right.
highways is where the majority of road crash mortality and morbidity
Right.
is.
Sure. Mr. Bejal, you want to say something?
Yes, Corona, if you remember, there is a subway at Sion. Many people are not aware about that. And that was not used at all, everyone was crossing on the road. And about 20 years back, that was the only place, connecting east and west. If you have to go to the airport, and if you are coming from Thane, you have to come all the way to Sion and then take a U-turn, and then through Dharavi you have to go there. The entire pedestrian population was walking on the road itself. Then I found out that there's a barricade also. There's a divider also, but the divider was hardly 3 to 3.5 feet. So I remember that time Mr. Satish Goel was there in MSRTC. I requested him for some funds, and made those barricades, 6 feet tall. So you make it impossible for them to cross on the road. If you're talking about the subways, if you're talking about rural population, you have to channelize that pedestrian population into the subway. Way back in 2009, I had given a proposal to MMRDA that, this entire stretch of Western Express Highway could be around 30 kilometers, not more than that. They had the funds also. Every year, we are losing around 170 to 180 lives by way of pedestrians. Pedestrians are dying, even now also on Western Express Highway, because they are crossing from east to west. So I had suggested that time कि तो आप पूरा रोड जो है ना उसको बैरिकेड कर लो आप जितने भी फुटपाथ है सब जगह पे आप उसको बैरिकेड कर लो that barricade should be so high and so strong that you can't just jump over it and you just can't cross over it. Who's going to pay the price for the 180 lives? Do we know what has happened to their families, to their children? What has happened to that? We don't know that. We are not concerned, because it's for us, it's just a figure. Last year 180 थे, ये साल 200 हो गए बस. बट अगर उसको हमने जाने के लिए रास्ता ही नहीं दिया, तो हो सकता है कि ये भी जाने हम बचा सकते हैं.
Right. We are almost running out of time, and before taking a few questions from the audience, Mr. Bejal, I have another question for you. In your last comment, you mentioned about chalaning your own, policemen, people from the police force who are not wearing helmets. So I want to ask you, is the law different for different people then? And I want to take the example, recently in Mumbai, somebody hit a pedestrian and he was sort of sent in prison for 3 months. But we've seen the high-profile case of Mr. Cyrus Mistry. His death and the guy who was, and the lady who was driving that SUV. 2 people were killed in that accident, and she's, gotten scot-free. So how do you explain this? Is the law different for different people when we talk about India?
No, the law is the same for everyone, be it a policeman, be it an army officer, whosoever it is. Even a politician or a minister also, it's the same. I must have challaned almost, quite a few of these politicians also. And I had to bear the brunt for that also by way of, whatever, that victimization happened, leave that aside. But for the policeman also, it's the same. He has to wear a helmet. He can't say this कि मेरा कैप है या क्या है या फिर मतलब मैं ड्यूटी पे जा रहा हूँ या मैं ड्यूटी खत्म करके आ रहा हूँ. It's the same for everyone. Now, enforcement, how powerful we are. If you remember the case of 2007 ka Alistair Pereira case, we lost 7 lives in that one accident.
Yeah.
Okay, and then after that, the matter went from the lower court to the session court to the high court to the Supreme Court. और फाइनली उसमें क्या हुआ फिर कि सब ये पूरे कोर्ट करने के बाद में उसको शायद 6 पहले 6 महीने सजा हुई थी. 6 महीने के बाद में उसको शायद सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने एनहांस करके 3 साल की सजा दी थी. वो साथ जाने गई, वो तो गई, वो तो वापस नहीं आने वाली है. बट 7 लोगों की जान लेने के बाद में अगर उसको 6 महीने की सजा हो रही है तो दिस इज रिडिकुलस, यू नो. सो इफ यू कंपेयर दैट विद द ऑफेंस ऑफ 185, यू नो, वेयर इन दिस ऑफेंस ऑफ ड्रंक ड्राइविंग, the imprisonment itself is for 6 months. So why don't we enforce that, you know, in a proper manner? हम उसका enforcement ही अगर ढंग से नहीं करेंगे तो ये सब नौबत ही नहीं आएगी. और रही बात, आई मीन आज भी अपने पास में वसीला या पुल या फिर लॉबिंग वगैरह होता ही है ना. आपका बेटा अगर टेस्ट के लिए जा रहा है, अगर लाइसेंस के लिए, तो पहला फोन तो आप ऑफिसर को कर देते हैं, किसी के पास थ्रू जान पहचान निकाल के, यार मेरा बेटा आ रहा है, जरा उसके ऊपर ख्याल रखना. इनफैक्ट है ना, हम अपने बेटे को लंगड़ा कर रहे हैं. उसने फेल होना चाहिए 1-2 बार. वो जब तक फेल नहीं होगा, जब तक उसको वो पिंच नहीं लगेगा कि भी मतलब वाई वाई, आई मीन आई हैव टू बी अ रिस्पॉन्सिबल ड्राइवर, यू नो, बिकॉज आई एम एंडेंजरिंग समवन एल्सेस लाइफ, यू नो.
Absolutely.
और इसमें वर्स्ट पार्ट क्या है सर, आई मीन आई होप द एंटायर पैनल एग्रीज विथ मी, कि अगर मर्डर है, मेरा और मयंक का नहीं जम रहा है, मेरा और मयंक का प्रॉपर्टी के ऊपर झगड़ा है, मैंने उसको मार डाला चाकू से, उसको खत्म कर दिया, उसको मोटिव है, कुछ तो भी इंटेंशन है मेरा, लेकिन मैं सड़क के ऊपर शराब पी के गाड़ी चला रहा हूँ, सामने से कोई अनजान आदमी आ रहा है, मैंने उसको मार डाला, कोई मोटिव में नहीं है साहब उसमें. मतलब क्या अचीव कर रहे हैं ना हम, एंड वेयर आर वी लीडिंग टू? तो दिस हैज टू बी टेकन ऑन ए वेरी सीरियस लेवल. मतलब आई डोंट नो मिस्टर बैनर्जी, he may be on the other side, but as far as road safety is concerned, you know, sir, there can be no compromise. सवाल ही नहीं आता है साहब.
Absolutely.
That's all.
Absolutely. So with that, I'll take a couple of questions from the audience, and because we're sort of really running out of time, we've already shot past by 5 minutes. So there's one question, and I think Karthik, we sort of missed getting a response from you on this, about the roadworthiness of vehicles. So, how can that become a key element here when we talk about the overall road safety? The main basic challenges there. So how can that be improved?
So, roadworthiness of the vehicles is being improved in India in 2 steps. First, I'll talk about the commercial vehicles. Earlier, the vehicle fitness, each commercial vehicle, because they're running 3, 4, 5,000 kilometers a month, they require extensive maintenance, extensive upkeep. So there's a fitness test that happens every 2 years after, depending on the age of the vehicle, right? Now that was happening in a visual basis. Now the government has come up with a rule that from October 2024, all of these have to be automated through automatic testing stations. So government has set certain parameters for each test, and that has to happen automatically, and there will be no manual intervention, no subjectivity. So there will be increased transparency in the roadworthiness of the vehicle. What I feel that this in the longer term will apply to private vehicles also, and should apply to private vehicles like it is in the European and the American countries. Only then can you really improve the roadworthiness of the vehicles. The RVSF policy, the vehicle recycling policy, is also touching upon these, because the vehicles with older technology of 15 years and 10 years, they're also going to be going through the ATS system to prove their roadworthiness, to prove their pollution controls, so that they are not on the road and they can be taken off the road. So in that sense, there is a lot of things happening in terms of checking the roadworthiness. A lot of other things are happening to ensure that genuine spare parts are used and not spurious parts are used. So a lot of technologies are coming up, like microdots, that we have developed and we are introducing, that will improve and help in identifying, improving and increasing genuine spare parts that are used. So I am quite optimistic looking at the kind of technology that is coming, the kind of laws that are coming, the kind of intention behind those laws that are coming. For example, in North, they've taken a target, and the mandate is that they want to reduce road accidents by 50% by 2030. Right. So it is going to, encourage all stakeholders involved, like SIAM, like yourself. Autocar Professional has a road safety conclave. We have a road safety week every year in India in January, right? And companies like me who are focused now, all our products are directly or indirectly linked to road safety. So with the help of technology, I understand it's a multi-dimensional issue. There are a lot of challenges, but I'm sure with the help of technology and with the help of the right push that is happening on all levels of the government and private stakeholders, we're going to be achieving that.
No, absolutely. That's very well said, Karthik, and also sort of, summarize what the entire gist of this discussion is as well. And we have got a flurry of questions coming in, but I'm really sorry we've completely run out of time. So just to summarize in a nutshell, I think what we've discussed over the last 1.5 hours is that, what Karthik just also mentioned, that, it's a multi-dimensional problem and it needs the efforts from all across, all these stakeholders. And only then are we going to see some substantial improvements in the overall safety of people, of vehicles, of motorists, of pedestrians on the Indian roads. And enforcement is going to play a critical role. Education is going to play the most fundamental role here. And engineering with technology, I think, is going to be more important in sort of, elevating the black spots on the roads that we often see in India. So once again, thank you very much to all of you for being with us and for taking out the time and for sharing your really insightful thoughts. Really appreciate your time, all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayank. Have a nice day, everybody.
Thank you.
And with that, we would now like to move to the next session, which is a technical presentation session. And I would like to invite Mr. Ramanathan Srinivasan, the Managing Director of ATS, Automotive Test Systems. Mr. Ramanathan is going to give us a presentation on validation of ADAS systems for Indian scenarios and conditions. So I have a request to all the attendees that, you can send your questions to Mr. Ramanathan in the Q&A box. Unlike the panel discussion, I think we're going to have some bit of time with Mr. Ramanathan at the end of his presentation to take the questions with him. Mr. Ramanathan, over to you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayank, and thank you for the opportunity. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ramanathan. I head a company called Automotive Test Systems. So I'll just give you a short brief of what we do before we go delve more into the topic itself. So today I'm going to talk about validation of ADAS systems in vehicles, looking into Indian road conditions, Indian traffic conditions. So that's the goal of the presentation. So at Automotive Test Systems, we are a company who support the automotive industry in setting up laboratories. So we sell equipments, we completely give setups for testing and validation of the entire vehicle or components, as the case may be. And we also are a company which manufactures test systems for electric motor testing or battery testing or ADAS, for example. So we manufacture different equipment. I have a company in Germany called Chrysler, through which we export systems across the world. And we're also one of the largest supplier of end-of-line test system, which test every truck probably in India and most of the cars manufactured in India for quality before it comes to the dealer. So this is what we do. Apart from that, we are an engineering company. That means that we offer test services to customers. We have different laboratories across India, in Pune, in Coimbatore, Bangalore, Chennai, and off late we are going to be going into Indore very soon to use the facilities at Natrax probably to start with ADAS testing there and electric vehicle testing. And later on going across to Telangana. You must have heard about the Telangana Mobility Valley. So we'll be the operator of the Telangana Mobility Valley there, and along with TUV Rhineland from Germany. And we'll be setting up test tracks and test facilities for future mobility testing. Let's say looking at future technologies, whether it is hydrogen fuel cell or battery or motor or ADAS or autonomous, as the case might be. Just to give you a very quick overview, and we have a lot of partners from Europe supporting us, some of them like IPG from the simulation world, AB Dynamics from the actual testing world, as well as simulator world. So these are all companies who are all pioneers in their field in terms of testing and validation of systems for ADAS or autonomous vehicle development. This slide shows a glimpse of some of the laboratories that we have, where we do testing of vehicles.
Mr. Ramanathan, I'm not sure, sorry to interject, I'm not sure if we are able to see your presentation properly. So first I would request if you could bring it in the full screen mode.
All right, just give me a moment, please.
Yeah. So,
are you able to see it now?
At my end, I'm still able to see this in your PowerPoint mode only. I'm not able to just see the slide, but I can see the entire PowerPoint screen as well. So I think there's some trouble here in, yeah, if you can just redo it.
Yeah, we'll just reload.
Yeah.
that. Is it better now?
Yes, now this is in full screen mode, so you can please.
Thanks so much.
And
Yeah,
just
apologies.
no, that's all right. Just we have around 30 minutes for your presentation,
Yes.
so we'll go until 5 o'clock with this presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll be going through this quickly.
Sure.
Yeah, these are some of the laboratories that we have across. You can see that we do all type of testing, whether it is component testing or whether it is in terms of electric vehicle or durability, vehicle dynamics, performance simulation. So we have different laboratories, and we support the automotive industry in developing products, better products. So that's what we do as an engineering company. Support with testing programs, validation programs. So today I'm going to talk about ADAS testing. So I think you must have already heard a lot of speakers in the last couple of days in this forum talking about road safety, talking about how many accidents happen in India, how many casualties we have. Probably you know that there are figures like what 15 or 16% of people who die are pedestrians, and the mortality rates are pretty high in India. So obviously, it's not a question of whether this technology is required or not. It's a question of when are we going to completely implement it for Indian conditions. People have been talking about how tough Indian conditions are. And I'm sure that these are technical challenges that engineers are working towards solving them. And today I'm going to discuss about the tools and how do we go about this whole process of developing and validating a particular vehicle for Indian conditions, looking at ADAS scenarios. Yeah, so you know that advanced driver assist systems are supposed to help in reducing the accidents by either giving an alarm or going further, helping the driver take autonomous, depending upon what level of autonomy we have, depending upon what type of control we have, probably trying to avoid the accident by either braking or steering or both. And there are additional features like adaptive lighting or parking, or there are other applications of ADAS where the technology helps the driver to do some of these maneuvers. So just to show you a V-cycle here, talking about when you start a vehicle development program, you look at bringing in all the different type of models and try to test and validate the models. As the industry is going forward and as we have faster computers, faster software, that is capable of processing a lot of commands together, we are now able to entirely test and validate a vehicle in the virtual domain, bringing in accurate models of vehicles, of the chassis components, of the powertrain, or the entire vehicle, let's say, of the different models that are required for individual components. Like a tire model can be brought in, a steering model can be brought in, a brake model, a suspension model. So we can completely bring in a vehicle. And people are looking at correlating with the real vehicle and making more and more testing and validation in the virtual side. So that's what is clearly indicated here as well for ADAS. So you know that in ADAS, we have sensors, you have radar sensors, you have ultrasonic sensors, you have LiDARs, you have cameras, and you have probably a sensor fusion in many a time. In India, people are starting with probably a radar, a couple of radars or a couple of cameras or a single camera to start with, looking at forward collision volume, looking at autonomous emergency braking, looking at driver drowsiness detection, looking at lane keep assist, and looking at probably parking. So these are the early use cases in India where we have, most of the industry is working towards, and most projects that we are working on are somehow related to these 4 or 5 domains. So today I'm going to take you through this V-cycle on how this development happens across. I'm going to restrict myself. I won't be going deep into the technology side now. I'll be going, because of the time shortage, I'll be more going towards the testing and validation side of this stuff here. So I'm going to start with Indian driving scenarios. The very first thing that we need when you want to develop or to test an ADAS vehicle is to look at what is the use case for me. So how is it going to be used in Indian conditions? So what are the different components? People talk about how tough it is in India because of the close proximity of our driving. And people are afraid of whether, the radar is going to completely keep on beeping, 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 as it did in my vehicle a couple of years back. I had to switch it off. So rather we have to develop it further using AI. People are working towards that to tune it for Indian conditions, looking at what are those dangerous conditions where a collision can happen. How can we save lives? With incentives coming in probably from the insurance guys, this is definitely going to be something that every manufacturer would like to put across. And today we see that many vehicles are coming with ADAS features. At this point of time, probably on some of the top models, but over a period of time, I think it's going to come across in every vehicle. It's just a question of time. So the very first thing is to generate scenarios, take it across into the virtual domain, put across different types of sensors in the virtual domain, virtual sensors, and see whether with a certain sensor combination, are you able to detect, analyze, perceive, and then able to avoid a collision by using controls or warnings or whichever the case may be. So that's what the whole the idea in this. So that means that the idea is first to collect what is India, how do we drive? So that's where the problem is today, that if I want to put up across a regulation for ADAS today, so I do not know what are the different scenarios in India. Are we covering all the scenarios? So the very first step for anybody who's developing this is to probably first start collecting data. So by collecting data, it's not just a small camera or a mobile camera that you can use, because I also need to know the distance between the different objects, the speeds of the different actors, what I'm covering across on the street. So it means that I need to have an intelligent system with stereo cameras, IMUs. Yeah, so a system which is able to record and give me some intelligent data about my vehicle, that is my ego vehicle, that is my test vehicle, and the other actors around my vehicle. And then to filter out a lot of this junk data that I might be recording across and bring across to me the critical data where I feel that it can cause an accident, where my vehicle has to react to avoid an accident. So that for me would be one scenario. So like this, we are looking at collecting something like probably 200,000 scenarios or 150, 200,000 scenarios, which will probably be the set of data that a system has to pass, all this kind of scenarios, so that it is tuned and ready for Indian conditions. So are we able to test all of these scenarios across on a test track? Not possible. 100,000 and 50,000 scenarios. Look at the different types of speeds at which you would like to simulate or test it. So it will be almost impossible to test and validate such a system on a test track or on the real road conditions. So that is why we start with simulation. Just to give you an example, it's also not that easy to bring such a recorded data back into the simulation domain. So you need a special AI-based algorithm to do this, which we had created across in Chennai. Many companies have it probably today. Most companies are working towards creating such kind of algorithms where you are able to record the data and quickly convert it across, filter it, convert it into scenarios, which can be used for simulation and testing. I'll just give you a short video to explain this quickly. So this is Chennai for us. On the right hand side, you see the real Chennai roads there. On the left hand side, you see our software has converted that into a simulation environment, and we are now running it in simulation. Yeah. So the idea is we bring in as much information as possible from real road conditions under different times into the simulation, so that then we can test and validate our cameras, our radars, our sensor combinations, our EC algorithms, the entire ADAS system in the virtual domain. So let's see how we test and validate it in the virtual domain first. Yeah. So before we go into that, just to have a look at what type of testing I talked about: AEB, autonomous emergency braking, forward collision warning, adaptive cruise control. These are all the use cases that we are talking about. But these are not really Indian use cases. We are talking about general use cases which are followed by Euro NCAP or NISTA, NHTSA from the US. Yeah. So are these valid for India, or do we need to have separate regulations for India? Are the dummies, are the test objects, the fabrics, the height of the dummies, of the child, of the adult, the weight, yeah, are these just enough for our traffic condition? This is something that we need to discuss as an industry and decide on what type of test vehicles, what type of people, cows, dogs, what are the different actors, the three-wheelers, e-rickshaws. Yeah, we have something very specific to India, the number of two-wheelers, the integration or the interactions between different types of vehicles across on the street, including tractors with 3 floors of cargo at the back. Yeah, so the driver who has absolute no clue about what's happening at the back, crossing a street in fog. Yeah, so we have different types of scenarios. So these are different actors that we need to bring in as part of the regulatory framework, that these tests has to be done on some of these type of situations, which we call as scenarios. So I'll just quickly go through to show you what type of tests, what type of regulations are there, and what do we do in these tests. So you look at ACC, you're looking at, in this example, a radar or LiDAR, looking at forward collision warning. If you have multiple radars across, you can also look at the rear side collision as well, the objects, what they are doing across. If somebody is coming in really close, you get a warning out of that, or maybe some kind of a control is possible. So initially in India, we're all starting with forward, and later on, probably in the next years, we'll see that there'll be cars with 4 or 5 different radars and a couple of cameras. So this is a maneuver catalog, what type of tests we do in terms of an ACC testing for adaptive cruise control. So looking at different situations that can be simulated. So you know that, when you are doing adaptive cruise control going forward, you can even latch across to a vehicle in the front. You can maintain a certain distance from the vehicle in front of you in the case that if it's not only about controlling a certain speed, it's also about controlling the speed as per the vehicle in the front of you. So if it brakes, you also brake, and you can always keep on maintaining a certain distance from the vehicle ahead of you. So these are some of the test cases in adaptive cruise control testing. In terms of AEB, here you see that you get a warning first, probably in most vehicles in India today, and followed by a steering or a braking, or braking plus steering, depending upon what the situation is. And here again, when we do a testing, we need to look at the collision between if my vehicle is moving at a certain speed against a stationary object. So we here look at TTC, that is time to collision. That is very important. We look at the distance before which, that means that we detected and then we are able to stop. So that was, we try to stop that collision. So we try to measure the time to collision under different conditions in this case. And we look at stationary conditions, then vehicle to vehicle, simulating a condition where the car again in front of you brakes from, for example, 60 to 20. Or it could be an emergency braking from 80 to 0. So it could be different. In this case, you see that we slowly increase the speed from 10 to 50 kilometers per hour against a stationary vehicle. Yeah. So in this case, there is again you have 2 scenarios where you have a certain speed and you have a stationary vehicle, and then you have a moving vehicle where the vehicle in front of you is basically decelerating at different decelerations. You look at -2 meters per second square or -6 meters per second square, which is more like a faster braking that happens in front of you. So this is a situation when something else comes in front of the vehicle in front of you, and that guy brakes, and you have to respond. So this is a simulation of that kind of a scenario. So this is just giving you an example of different kind of test cases to just give you an idea about how many different types of variants are there in each type of these tests to validate just one particular program, whether it is ACC or AEB or lane departure. So to do this kind of a testing on a track, doing it 5 or 10 times to get a reputation is a lot of work. Yeah. So we take all these scenarios back into the virtual domain first, and first start testing in the virtual domain. So I'm going to explain to you how we do that in the virtual domain. So here, the first thing that we need is to bring in the models. To start with, the vehicle model. It could be you might be testing a truck, or you might be my test vehicle is a car or a motorbike, doesn't matter. But the idea is to bring in a realistic model which brings out its handling characteristics, The chassis components has to be very similar because we are talking about braking, steering. We are looking at the yaw rates. We are looking at lateral acceleration. Yeah, so we are looking at the pitching. Yeah, so it's really important that the vehicle dynamics characteristics of the vehicle is represented correctly in the virtual domain. That means the model of the vehicle and the subcomponents that we bring in, the chassis components, the powertrain components into the virtual world has to be as realistic as possible to the real vehicle. So this is where, what we bring in is a plant model. In technical terms, we call it as a plant model. You can call it a simulation software, where you are able to bring in all these different parameters into this plant model. That means you must have designed this, or your vendor might have designed it, or a tier one or somebody else from where you're buying these subcomponents probably. You have to take all those models, bring in the engineering data, or the model itself as a software. Yeah, so from a different package probably, and you can bring in those models that you have designed into this plant model. In this case, it is from IPG Carmaker that I'm showing you. This is a company from Germany. Of course, there are multiple programs where you can bring in these plant models. So the other important thing when you do ADAS testing is to bring in different types of driving behavior into your test vehicle. So every driver, typically drives differently. Some are really aggressive, some are young and aggressive, some are old and slow driving, women. So everybody has different driving characteristics. Yeah. So the aggressiveness or the way you drive could be different. So you need to bring in different types of driver models in and test each one of these different scenarios with different driver behaviors. Yeah, what exactly happens when I drive or you drive a vehicle? What type of accident scenarios are typically generated? So it has to be an intelligent driver model which is able to react to the traffic as we program it, as sort of an interactive driver model. So that's really important when you do such kind of ADAS testing. Now comes the actual ADAS components. So you know that when you talk about ADAS components, the important thing is to bring in different types of sensor models. So whether it could be some standard ideal sensors, it could be some really high fidelity sensors, or you can design your own sensors. So you can bring in a raw signal from it. It will be like a point cloud in terms of probably radar. And then you just take the point cloud and you say that, I don't want a sensor itself, that I will design my algorithm to analyze this data that comes across from this radar sensor. So it's just a raw signal and without any processing. That means you have intelligent sensors and you have probably what we can call as dumb sensors. So it depends on what type of sensor you want to bring in, what type of algorithm that you are trying to develop, and what type of sensor you are trying to develop in. So in some cases, you just bring in a sensor from the market where you have some specifications which you can put in across. This sensor probably has also some intelligence. To give you an example, probably it already has a processor which can process the signal and also is able to process it and identify what the object is in front of it. So for example, it can differentiate between a human being and an animal or a car or a motorcycle. So it can differentiate between different objects, that is able to define what it is seeing in front of it. It's able to detect the object. It's also able to detect how fast that object is moving, whether it is stationary or moving, and how fast is it, and what is the distance between us and that object. So these are all things that you need to determine. And this is where the intelligence comes from, whether the intelligence is in the sensor or it is in the processing. So the plant model now gives different options for you to bring in and process this data and bring in the perception, bring in the analysis layer of the data. Yeah. So then the next level is that you test and validate them in the virtual world. That means that you have the vehicle, you create the traffic, you have the sensor models inside your vehicle, and you try to position the sensors in the right way across in the vehicle. Look at what the field of view of the sensor is, where do you mount that sensor in the vehicle, and then you run this sensor model that you have designed, or the sensor fusion that you have designed across different scenarios in the virtual world. I'll come to that in a while to show you exactly how it is done on the virtual side of things in terms of testing and validation. So the next level is that you have a real sensor not a virtual sensor in this case, or a real ECU. And you want to test the ADAS ECU and validate that under all these scenarios. So now I have a real ECU, but I need to generate the signals from these different scenarios. So all these signals from the vehicle, that means the ECU is going to be interfaced with probably the different subsystems in the vehicle. It could be the ESP system, the ABS, the steering, the braking, all the controls are from those systems on the chassis. So this guy has to control that. Your algorithm has to control it. On one side, it has to interact with the sensors and get the information either from the dumb or the intelligent sensors, process it, and then interact with the vehicle systems to act upon it, okay, for the controls. So this is what we do in hardware in the loop. We give these signals across to the sensors, of the sensors, let's say from the virtual world, from the virtual traffic into this real ECU, and get the reaction from this ECU and send it across to the controls in the virtual vehicle and see whether my vehicle is able to avoid that collision. Across these 200,000 different scenarios, we test your algorithm to test and validate if it's going to work across this. So this is much easier done on the software because you can run automatic routines today, and these type of things can be done faster. So if you have a real sensor, probably the first thing if you do, if I have a camera, I want to validate it, I have something called a monitor hill. So it is very easy to put the simulation program on a screen, and that's a monitor in this case, and focus the camera as if it is in a vehicle in the correct way across onto this monitor, and get those images into your real camera, and then take it into your ECU and see whether your intelligent camera or it is going to be a dumb camera, whichever way it is, that it works to the ability that you want it to. Yeah, so then you play around with different kind of sensor models there to look at what is the optimum solutions. So this is an example of a monitor hill that we have, and we do a lot of tests in this. The other part, what we call as a sense inject today, is that we are able to inject the information from the virtual world, what you see on the right side here on this video, across on to the real ADAS ECU. Yeah, it could be a camera, radar. So all these signals can be injected across into the ECU from the virtual world. So what we call as a sensor injection, or let's say we give similar data as a real sensor is going to give, a particular sensor model that you've chosen for your vehicle, a certain model, how it is going to behave. You test it on the virtual world under these thousands of different scenarios. So this is what we call as a hardware in the loop, because you have a real hardware here. Could be the ECU, could be the sensor plus the ECU. So here it shows a setup which has the sense inject here. So there you have on the computer where the scenarios, the accident scenarios are being run. That's your test vehicle, yeah, which is moving across. So you have created this traffic, and the left-hand side you see the reaction of the sensor that you are going to test now, and what type of signal that sensor is generating. A radar sends it across in a different way, the camera in a different way. Each one has got a different format of data transfer. The intelligence one's probably using a certain interface. So accordingly, the processing is done and the data is sent across to that hardware in the loop system, which is just behind on that. So this is a sort of small example of just showing how a sense inject works. Yeah, and yeah, I'll just take it through very quickly that the idea is to bring in all the different types of vehicle components, including powertrain, including all the sensors, including all the chassis components, all across into this multi-hill system, into the simulation world, either it is on the SIL or HIL. And this way we can quickly test and validate your algorithms or your sensor selection in the virtual world in our office itself. So at this point of time, I'm talking about all the testing in the laboratory or in the office. So now we go to the next one again, the next step, what we call as a driver in the loop. So in this case, I have a real driver. So I have a chassis there. I have a system which can now move with 6 degrees of freedom. It starts with 3 degrees of freedom, 6 degrees of freedom. So I have high-speed projectors. I have video recordings, or from the simulation side, I can bring in realistic scenarios from the mountains or from the actual road scenarios. This is like a real simulator. You look at it and you drive it. Yeah, so I have a real driver in the loop with all your ADAS sensors mounted across, and you're testing and validating your ADAS functionalities or including vehicle dynamics functionalities in a simulator. It's in a simulator. Yeah, so this is the advanced driver simulator. So you're looking at, from what type of forces come across. You basically bring in your entire vehicle data across into this simulator, and accordingly, you can also simulate the pitching and rolling and all of that, the lateral versus the longitudinal forces. All of that data can be set and brought into from real world conditions back into the laboratory. So some other concepts, cheaper versions of some of these or other versions. Many companies have chassis dynamometers where we've been doing emissions testing for decades in India. So these chassis dynamometers can be upgraded with hill systems. You know that a chassis dynamometer normally is a roller. Yeah, so you typically do longitudinal testing in this. But if I can remove the connection between the steering system and the wheels and provide an actuator which simulates the wheel movement across to the ADAS simulator. Again, you have multiple screens. In this lab of mine, I have shown a very small picture of three monitors there. This was taken some years back, but the modern facility that we are creating has a similar one as you saw in the previous video, where we have a bigger screen, and you see it as it's more realistic, and you drive your vehicle at different speeds and test and validate for longitudinal and lateral dynamics on a chassis dynamometer. It's like a very low cost, let's say, an upgrade to an existing chassis dynamometers. So what I can also provide across is probably a radar simulator, which is fitted right on top of the radar sensor to give it realistic information from the simulation for the radar sensor. Yeah, because for such a situation may not be good to test a radar sensor. So I need a separate radar simulator with a certain object definition. Probably it can detect 1 or 8 objects depending upon what the specification is. The other way is probably to put a dynamometer, something like this, which is a wheel-based dynamometer, where it absorbs the power. That means I remove the tire and I connect the dyno directly on each wheel. It's a hub dynamometer, and it absorbs the power from the vehicle. So I can drive as if I'm driving a real car. The car engine is switched on, and I drive it again in my laboratory, just on the floor, on my shop floor. And this dynamometer can absorb, and these dynamometers are on wheels. So I can also do steering on this. And again, I have a screen in the front, and similarly, I can validate my ADAS sensors in the laboratory. Now, so far, I've been talking about lab testing and validation in terms of SIL, MIL, SIL, and driver in the loop to some extent, and with the chassis dynamometer, probably the first concept of the entire vehicle being taken across into the virtual world. So if you can realize that I'm testing a real vehicle on those dynamometers, but then the traffic and all the other vehicles and the infrastructure, the roads, and all of that is being brought across from the virtual world. Yeah, so that was the thing, that I'm taking my entire vehicle across into the virtual world with the dynamometer. Now I'm going to explain another concept on the track, that I have the real VCU, probably with sensors or without sensors, and I would like to first put it across in my vehicle, connect it to all the chassis component systems, ESP, ABS, steering, braking, everything connected together to the ADAS ECU. And I want to test and validate it, not in real traffic, but just on a piece of road, which I have in my office or my parking lot or a small track. Yeah. So the idea is to simulate the entire traffic, everything across in the virtual world, taking the vehicle across to the virtual world, but it's a real vehicle. So you have a real ECU, and it is connected across to the controls, and you want to test. So I'm going to show you an example of how it works with a parking maneuver, where there is a real vehicle and the driver is going to drive it, put it across on a parking mode, automatic parking mode, and see how it works. So on the top, you see an empty ground where a real vehicle is coming. On the bottom, you see the traffic, which is created in the virtual world. So I've taken the real vehicle into the virtual world now at the bottom. Okay, the driver is now initiating the parking maneuver. So the real vehicle feels that there is a traffic there, a lot of other cars parked, and it is trying to park in between the virtual cars. So you see on the top, the vehicle is parking itself in that particular position. That means I have an IMU there, of course, and the GPS coordinates, and it's all like, already set across properly in terms of position, so that the vehicle knows at what position the other cars are with respect to the test vehicle. See, from inside the vehicle, so the driver sees the traffic on the virtual on the screen, he puts the parking maneuver, and now the vehicle now steers, goes into reverse, steers, and parks the vehicle between the different virtual vehicles. This is just one example of how you can test and validate using real and virtual worlds both. Yeah, that means I have a real car, a real system, a braking system, steering system, but the traffic and the environment in this case is virtual. Yeah, so this is called vehicle in the loop. I can do autonomous emergency braking test here, adaptive cruise control. It's just up to our imagination as to what type of test that we can do in combination with the real and the virtual world together. So the first part of my presentation was only on the virtual world. The second part, now I'm talking about the combination between the real and the virtual world. Going forward, I'm going to talk about when the entire ADAS system is integrated across, we would like to test and validate it on a test track. This is the third part of my
Mr. Raman, I'm really sorry to intervene here, but actually, we are sort of short past. We have short past the time.
2 minutes.
That we had
That's
for the
it.
presentation.
Just 2 minutes.
Sure.
Just the end of my presentation.
Yes, absolutely.
Just my end of the
Just
presentation.
expedite and close soon. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
So you look at now real validation where the similar scenarios are brought in across, and in this case, you see a vehicle being tested. With a stationary pedestrian in this case, you see that many of the pedestrians, they run across in the middle of the street, either they come back or they just stop. So such kind of scenarios can be simulated here using test platforms and with these dummies. So you see some of these tests that are being conducted on a real testing and validation. Yeah, so it could be a motorcycle, it could be a pedestrian, or it could be a car to car. So I'll show you some other. So in this case, it is a towed target. It is getting simulated when the vehicle in front of you is getting stopping. So that's a picture of the car there. It's a foam car which is being towed across a Euro NCAP vehicle target there. You're doing A/B testing there. So each one of those vehicles has a lot of intelligence inside in terms of IMU. You need to have a certain accuracy of 2 centimeters and things like that. So I'll just go beyond it. In all these tests, we use a lot of robotic systems for testing on the test track, braking robots, steering robots, gear shift robots, etc. This you see is the most modern way of testing of autonomous vehicles on the track with guided soft targets. So you see a soft a platform on which there's a foam car. And if your ADAS fails, this is what happens. Nobody gets killed, nothing gets damaged. The foam is broken. You can reassemble the car and test your valid ADAS vehicle again. Yeah. So these are different types of tunnels. You have a lot of foam target. This is what we are creating right now in India. This laboratory will have all these systems where anyone can come in and test either in the SIL, VIL, or actual vehicle. So this is what I wanted to show. And apart from that, we have a complete evaluation software which you use to validate right from MIL, SIL, VIL, HIL, whatever it is, until the final system. So this is in Europe, we call it swarm testing. In India, we already have swarms. If you go to a road in Chennai or in Delhi, you probably have 8 lanes coming from Gurgaon to Delhi, probably 300 vehicles moving together. So that's swarm. So this kind of testing will come to India in a few years, where we simulate multiple vehicle interactions on a test track. So this is what we are trying to create in our laboratory in Telangana and at NetRacks. Thank you so much for giving me the time. Thank you.
That's really wonderful, Mr. Srinivasan, and a very thorough and very detailed presentation there, and sort of commendable work that you're doing in terms of ADAS, because this is the technology that we are going to see coming up increasingly in cars in future. And right now also we have already started to see this. Just a quick, there's a lot of comments in the chat box for you, and just a quick question. So you mentioned about this new facility at Telangana. So a quick overview of it. When can we expect it? What sort of investments are you making there? Just a quick one there.
The Telangana facility, we are going to invest about 250 crores there to set up EV and ADAS laboratory. It will have a test track for ADAS. So one of the most modern test tracks in India for ADAS testing and development. So this will be in collaboration with TÜV Rheinland from Germany. So they'll be my operator there together. So we'll be homologating there as well.
Okay.
So for Indian as well as European or American or whatever regulations that a customer wants to export their vehicle to, accordingly we'll be doing that. But before that, we are starting this probably in Indore within 6 months. So the ADAS laboratory itself is functional already, and we have started the basic testing, establishing it since last month. So from next month onwards, professionally, we'll be starting testing in Indore. So we'll be hiring the Natrax facility initially to do this. So the setup will be based there.
Right.
And as soon as my tracks are ready in Telangana in a year's time or maximum 2 years' time, so there will be an extended facility there at Telangana.
So you'll not just be testing these solutions for exports, but for India market as well, right?
Both.
Okay.
All for all customers across.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
the initial targets are more Indian customers than
Okay.
customers from abroad.
Okay. No, all the best to you on that. And, I would request, if you could just, since we have completely run out of time for this session, so still there's a lot of engagement in the Q&A box and, people are wanting to connect with you. So if you could just, with your camera off, you can just be here and, just reply to some of the messages that have
I'll
come.
try to do that.
I really appreciate that. Yeah.
I'll do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And with that, with a little delay in the handover, so we'll move to the next session, which is a fireside chat between Mr. Satyakam Arya, the MD and CEO of Daimler India Commercial Vehicles, and my colleague Ketan Thakkar. Ketan, over to you, please.
Thank you, Mayank, for a lovely session so far. Thank you, Mr. Satyakam Arya, for joining us for this important session on safety and commercial vehicles. Just a little bit about safety and commercial vehicles. As of 2021, over 40 million commercial vehicles that are plying on Indian roads were over 15 years old. With enforcement being a significant challenge in the country, many of them ply without even fitness certificate. So in an environment where overloading of truck is a common phenomenon, these are sadly, safety hazards on the wheels. While the government has come out with a scrappage scheme, it is still not mandatory. Majority of new commercial vehicles sold in the country are still chassis based or on cows, as they are famously called. And these are largely owned by smaller individual truck owners who end up going to unorganized bodybuilders in order to save costs. While there are mandated regulations on bodybuilding, one is not sure of whether these are followed well. The commercial vehicle market and the sector actually suffers from numerous other issues: lack of trained drivers, availability of drivers, and the ones who are driving are either overworked or lack skills to traverse the difficult and diverse terrains of India. Given the environment, there have been proactive corporates like Daimler who were extremely bold to enter India and sell only fully built vehicles. Daimler has led from the front on safety and reliability since its entry. To talk about how one can make roads safer and more about what is the role of the government, policy makers, enforcement agencies, and vehicle makers in order to reduce the casualties on Indian roads and even make drivers' life easier who are usually overworked. Mr. Satyakam Arya, if you could, share your insight on these and many issues. We are really looking forward to your insight. Thank you very much for joining us.
Well, good evening, Ketan, and good evening to everyone who is on this call. And I think it's a pleasure to be here today and to connect back with you, and especially to talk about this very important topic of road safety. I think everyone knows how much we lag behind the rest of the world when it comes to road safety. And therefore, I believe that this picture will not change unless some things which we have never done are done in future. So, well, you talked a lot about the CV industry, or let's say the dynamics of CV industry in India, the structure of CV industry in India. And I believe those all are the challenges which we are currently facing. They are also the opportunities if we try to change the lens and look at it differently. And the sad part is, or it's ironic, that the CV industry is the barometer of the economy, but it is still quite unregulated. And the drivers, which are, we always say that they are the unsung heroes of our economy, are actually not cared for enough. In the last few months or years, we have also seen that the chorus on sustainability has gone up dramatically. But it's right now quite a lot focused on zero emission technologies. Well, safety is also a very important aspect of sustainability. And I think the regulations need to be implemented in a much different way than they have been done so far, with the strong intent of transforming the CV industry. I think everyone who is involved in this ecosystem, whether it's government or the regulators, whether it's OEMs or the fleet owners and the drivers, have a very important role to play when it comes to safety.
Right, right. So what's your assessment on the current road safety challenges? I mean, you spoke about enforcement, but over the last 5 years, we've seen multiple new regulations that have come up that has moved towards making vehicles more safer. However, the number of deaths on road and commercial vehicles do contribute a significant pie of the reasons behind deaths on Indian roads. What is your personal assessment on the factors behind the number of accidents, and how can we reduce the number of deaths on Indian road, and what role can commercial vehicle makers or the overall ecosystem can bring in?
There are a lot of reasons for why the situation is like this today. And I think the most important reason is our attitude towards safety. And I'm talking about everyone in the ecosystem, right? Including the people who drive and meet those accidents, right? So we have to, as a country, as a nation, change our attitude towards safety. We have to get more sensitive on safety. And then if you look at the different actors in the game, government, OEMs, fleet owners or drivers, they all have to do their bit. Right. And let me first start with the regulators first. Well, if you look at the landscape of regulations when it comes to safety in the CV industry, I think we have a lot of catch up to do. We started our journey of regulations way back in 98, 2000, when we started with very basic regulations like on stopping distance, deceleration, steering, those aspects, very, very basic, much needed. We did that. And then in 2004 and 5, we started talking about harmonizing the road safety regulations in India with, for example, Europe, right? And then some regulations came in the area of lighting, tires, wheels, and rims. We also then in 2007 said, we want to bring the crash safety regulation for the cabins in India. We brought the regulation, but we did not mandate it. And this led to the fact that the cowl still prevails. When we entered the Indian market, 80% of the market was cows. And even today, 20 to 30% of the market is cow trucks. And we all know that if it's a half-built cabin and you have a wooden cabin on top, it will not meet any of the safety requirements which are mandatory or needed. So I guess a lot has to be done on the regulation side. We have a catch-up to do. And it's not only the job of government. I think the industry also has to partner with the government to change this game when it comes to safety.
Right. So from a regulatory standpoint, since you're emphasizing on that, over the last few years, we have seen, we've been hearing about, truck body code, bus body code, and there are specific cabin crash test standards that are in the offing or they've been implemented. So what are some of the key regulations that have emerged that have made the vehicles safer, or what more is needed from your perspective? 2 or 3 key, low-hanging fruits that can actually really help in ensuring that there are lesser number of lives that are lost on road, be it driver or pedestrian.
Yeah. So, Ketan, when it comes to the crash safety, it's very important how the cabin is designed and what kind of crash safety norms it fulfills. And there are 2 regulations I will talk about there. The first one is the ECR 29-02. It's a long phrase, but let's say the first step of regulation. What that regulation specifies is the crash safety norms till the lowest point of the windshield in the truck, right? Now, this is a regulation which has been there in Europe for decades. It was brought to India in 2007, but was not made mandatory, right? And this leads to the fact that still we have cow trucks which are being sold in India. When we came to the market, we said we will not follow that, because when it comes to safety, we have to do what is right, not which is just only mandatory, right? Now, why is that important? see, when you design a cabin with all the technology on simulation and design you have, you actually create a kind of cocoon which gets formed in case there is a frontal collision. So in all Bharat-Benz cabins, in case there is a frontal collision, a cocoon is formed of empty space where the driver is sitting, which protects the driver's body from injury or harm, right? The second aspect why more fatalities happen during accidents is, if an accident has happened and the driver is now stuck inside a mangled cabin, let's say, it takes sometimes hours to take him out and rush him to hospital. And we have seen in a lot of surveys that more than 20% of lives are lost because we just couldn't take out the body in time and take him to the hospital, right? So what happens in, for example, a Bharat-Benz cabin is that this cocoon is formed, and it is formed in a way that it's very easy to take out the driver and rush him to the hospital. This is the advantage of using engineering and technology to build safer cabins. So I guess this is a very important first step, which has to be done, implemented in India and forced in India. The other thing is, we have to change our attitude towards safety. As I said, we have to think about doing what is not yet mandated, but beyond, right? And I give you some more examples. We came with ABS as standard way back in 2015. We brought a rear vision system, and I guess you can imagine how important it is for trucks. In 2017, we came with that technology. And in 2018, we brought another industry-leading technology, which is called driver state monitoring, right? Which is continuously looking at the driver and seeing whether the driver is attentive or fatigued or if he's drunk, right? So if he's trying to drive in an alcoholic state. I guess these are the technologies which are very, very important to ensure safety on the road. There's another important aspect when we talk about the body code, air conditioning. Now you would say, why is air conditioning linked to safety? Well, air conditioning has a very deep linkage to safety. If you read various surveys which are done on accidents on the Indian roads, one of the leading cause of accidents in the CV is the fatigue of the driver. If the cabin is not comfortable, if the cabin is not air conditioned, the drivers get fatigued easily. And we all know that they drive long hours, right? And then they end up making mistakes. And they end up in an error or an accident happens, right? So air conditioning is another aspect which we should not think that it's a comfort feature only. It's also a safety feature. We came with our trucks with 100% air conditioning right from the beginning. And to our surprise, and I think this is very important for everyone to know who's listening to this chat, when we started, only 30% of our customers asked for air-conditioned trucks. Again, with the thinking that it consumes more fuel. In fact, Bharat-Benz gives 3% better fuel efficiency with air conditioning, right? Today, about 65% of our sales are with air-conditioned trucks, because the customers come back to us and say that they have happy drivers, they are more productive, and they feel much more safe. There's another very important aspect. We've seen, or we have studied that a lot of drivers, a large population of drivers actually lose their hearing on the right ear because they drive continuously long hours with windows open. And we know the noise level on our roads, honking and the general noise level, right? They end up losing their hearing in the right ear. Not good for them and not good for safety. So if you have air-conditioned cabins, you keep the window closed, and that also doesn't happen.
If I could, push a little bit further on the scowl market, because like you said, when you entered, 80% of the market was scowl, and I know it must have been really tempting for, you entering one of the largest markets in the world and yet not get into the core of what majority of the truck prospective buyer wanted. What has been your understanding about what really drives the cowl market? It's cost? Is it the ecosystem of bodybuilders? And any data points would you have that, when you, in case of a crash, a full body truck, what is the incidence of a person saving his life vis-a-vis if he were to have met with an accident in a cowl body. So first, just the behavioral aspect of prospective buyers on choosing cowl. Is it merely cost? Is it the industry? What really drives the cowl market? And in case of a crash, how does a full body truck versus a cowl behaves? And if you have any empirical data evidence that you would have over the years of so many number of trucks you would have sold.
Sure. Well, first of all, why cowl, right? I think cost is definitely one part. It's much cheaper. At least it looks much cheaper when you buy a half-built cabin. What we don't end up calculating is that then you give the truck for building the full body, which takes sometimes up to a month and also has a cost involved. The time of 1 month also has a cost involved. So I guess when we do the total equation, it may not be that, let's say, cost or lower in cost, right? But that's one aspect. The second aspect is there is a perception that a cowl cabin remains much cooler during summers, which is completely wrong. Engineering wise, it's completely wrong, right? A metal cabin is much better in that aspect. And the third aspect is, if you have some kind of minor accident or something happened during driving with a cowl cabin, it's much easy to repair, which is a fact. You can get it repaired roadside, but then it will not meet any crash safety norms, right? So these are some of the perceptions which have been built around the cowl over the period of so many years. Technically and engineering wise, they all are wrong. And I think this is where we need to focus on. We need to educate the drivers. We need to educate the fleet owners because, when an accident happens, they end up losing a driver many times. And then you end up also spending so much time on repairing a truck. And that's lost business, right? So that's a lot of collaterals in terms of compensating the family of the driver. Look at the family of the driver who lost their only source of livelihood. So if you put together all these things, I believe the answer is quite easy. What should we go for? And then the second thing you talked about was how do you
crash of a cowl versus
crash of a cowl versus a well-engineered cabin. Well, we've done some of these simulations, and those are mind-boggling. If you look at those simulations, you will clearly see you can't even compare a well-engineered cabin with a cowl. What happens to the dummy body we place there in terms of what it will face in case of a crash, right? So I think these are very, very important aspects. And earlier we talked about the first step of regulation, the R29-02. And this, as I said, is up till the windshield, the lowest point of the windshield. What about above, right? So the next step of regulation, which is already prevalent in Europe, is R29-03, right? And that ensures that the entire cabin, including the front windshield and the metal portion around it, provides crash safety to the driver. What happens during a crash is the driver tries to move, right, because of a frontal crash, and the metal portion around the windshield should actually crumple in a way to protect the driver from there. And I'm proud to tell this to you today and to all the viewers that without waiting for the regulations, Bharat-Benz cabins are now even certified for this 29-03. So we've not waited for regulation to come up. We are now providing the highest level of crash safety norms, which are prevalent in the world, also in Bharat-Benz in India.
Oh, fantastic. So in your view, you spoke about driver fatigue as well. A large part of the prospective buyers today are one or two single or, a small truck operator versus a major fleet operator. Majority of the market is still a small truck owner. And there's, as we know, there's immense paucity of drivers. So driver training becomes a very important element. One, they are not available. Second, the ones that are available are not literate or they are not skilled enough. Do you think, that is one of the biggest factors behind the higher proportion of casualties on account of accident in a commercial vehicle?
It is definitely a very important factor. I do not think it is the biggest one, but it is definitely a very, very important factor. And training is also an aspect of attitude, right? If we have an attitude towards safe driving or learning how to drive safe, we would definitely spend time on training or money on training. And I guess here, while we can say drivers should do that, it's our job to provide them this opportunity, right? So I believe it's a very, very important area of focus if we have to enhance safety on our roads. And, I think all the industry players, including us, we have been offering training to the drivers. I can speak on Bharat-Ben's behalf. Since the beginning, we have a training center inside our factory where the drivers are trained. We created master drivers who are then sent across India to train other drivers. Before we hand over a truck to our customers, we offer training to their drivers in our dealerships, or we have regional training centers across India where those trainings are provided. Now, a limitation there is always the kind of infrastructure you need to create for training, right? It's not so easy to do that in the size, the length and breadth of our country. So very recently, we have come out with how can we use technology in order to enhance and scale up this training, right? So what we've done is we've created a simulated driver trainer, right? So you sit in the Bharat-Ben's cabin and you have a screen in the front, and that simulator actually simulates real life driving conditions. It has got 27 driving modules, different kind of applications, different kind of road situations, mining to long haul expressways, everything is there. It is multilingual, so drivers who come with different language skills can also use it. It has artificial intelligence, so it kind of curates a training program for you. It measures your responses. It gives you a rating. It gives you the areas where you could improve, right? So you can carry that report with you, come back next time and work on improvements. So I think it's a great example of how you can use technology to benefit society, a kind of digital transformation. So we are currently doing pilot of it in our plant. The first batch of drivers are doing their training, and our plan is to then scale it up across India and provide this opportunity to our drivers to learn how to drive safe before they actually start doing that.
So what's the rollout plan like? I mean, is it going to be an open source and available to anyone and everyone who wants to adopt it? There are a lot of NGOs out there who actually work with the drivers to ensure that, right skill sets are imparted on them, the driving behaviors and all that. So what's the rollout plan of that simulator?
Well, absolutely. See, when it comes to safety, we would not like to keep things only with us. If there's an opportunity to scale it up by giving it to others, we will not hesitate to do so. As I said, we've recently rolled it out. The first batch of training is underway. We will do enough trainings to make sure that everything is working well, and then we will come with a plan to scale it up across India.
Right. You mentioned fatigue is one of the critical factors that drivers undergo, and that leads to many accidents as well. And many surveys have indicated that, it's actually a lack of attentiveness on part of driver, which has led to many accidents as well. But, you spoke about use of technology, the talk of ADAS being used, in a cost-sensitive market, what is the role of active and passive safety when it comes to ensuring that, some of these incidents can be, avoided?
Well, first of all, I think technology can play a great role here. And, how we use technology is we believe in providing a very comprehensive, integral safety concept in the vehicle, right? Now, what do I mean by this safety concept? There are 4 cornerstones normally when it comes to safety. The first one is, how do you provide technologies to ensure safe driving, right? This is where the autonomous, the level 2 autonomy and those kind of things come. So these are the features which promote safer driving, right? The second is the technologies which avoid a crash, right? So they are devices to prevent accidents from happening, And here it could be things like ABS, ESP, those kind of technologies. The third aspect is crash protection. So in case an accident has happened, how do you reduce the intensity of the crash? So here we talked about the cabin crash safety regulations. Airbags are another technology which help us to do that. And then the last aspect is the post-crash safety, which is more a passive approach. And here the thing, the technology can be emergency call response system or an event data recorder, so that you can avoid, take learning from it and not have the same thing there. So I believe technology can play a role in all these 4 areas, and that is what Daimler normally does. And we've brought a lot of different technologies to different parts of the world. In fact, we believe, or we are working on a plan that 75% of the vehicles delivered in our core markets by 2025 and 80% by 2030 will have a safety system that surpasses legal requirements in terms of scope or requirements. Right? Always stay ahead of the curve when it comes to regulations. And I give you some examples of things which we've done, which have proven to greatly enhance safety on the roads. And I believe we can also do that in India. Many times we take a stand that no, this will not work in India.
Right.
While sometimes it is true, but many times it is not. Right. So I give you some examples. An active brake assist. Today we have 1 million trucks running around the world with this feature.
Fantastic.
Right. And I believe that is
popularized in India as well.
We must popularize in India. Right. The side guard assist, one major challenge with commercial vehicles is when they take a turn and there is a cyclist or a two-wheeler. Right. And that's where the crash happens, fatality happens. So how do you provide that blind spot assist and a side guard assist with an automated braking function, that in case there is someone in the blind spot, the truck or the bus will know what to do if the driver has missed. A very, very important feature which I think we can introduce on the Indian roads. Right. Active drive assist. Now, as the infrastructure is coming up, as the expressways are coming up, I believe it's very imperative that we start thinking about bringing those kind of features. Active drive assist actually helps you keep in the lane. It helps you maintain distance from the vehicle in front of you. It's a kind of semi-autonomous or a level 2 autonomous feature, which I think in the next 5 years, Indian market can definitely afford to have. Right.
You see that democratizing over a period of time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. And then the last thing is about the lane departure. I know the reality on Indian roads. Many times we say, where are the lanes? Right. But the technology can actually help you to make lanes which are not yet painted on the road. But those are the lanes which we normally form when we drive on Indian roads. Right. So technology can also help you to do that. And I believe these are the things which will encourage discipline and which will prevent accidents from happening.
Right. Usually in case of an accident, we've always seen this fear. This truck underride accident prevention, usually, in case of a crash with a car or any other pedestrian on road or any other vehicle on road, usually the object outside is at a biggest threat. So how do you deal with this underride accident prevention? Because it's a large mass moving at a speed. How do you ensure the safety of vehicles, people, and environment around you?
Well, I think the first thing you can do there is, and I think that has already happened in India, is that you provide the rear underrun protection and the side underrun protection. So we have those devices, means we came with those devices and they are regulated in India that prevent that another small vehicle actually ends up entering or below a truck. Right. So those are very basic levels of safety which can be provided. But the other thing which again we have to look at is an active brake assist, for example, right? So which will prevent a collision from happening. A lot of accidents happen on Indian roads because a vehicle is parked alongside the highway or on the highway, right? And then you end up, ramming into that vehicle. And that's why, functionalities like this are absolutely necessary on Indian roads.
Right. So you've been responsible enough to bring in a lot of global technologies into India and have made your commercial vehicles safer here. But what's your view on regulation? I mean, we've seen with regards to other end of the market, which is two-wheelers and passenger vehicle, the regulations are now getting harmonized to some of the best regulations around the world. What is your assessment of the current regulatory framework that we have? How far do we have to go to ensure that, at least from a regulatory standpoint, India is aligned to some of the best markets in the world? And the biggest challenge is also on the enforcement. What's your view on that? So one is on the regulator's responsibility, what more can be done from a regulation standpoint, and second is on the enforcement standpoint. When you make the trucks so much more good and better, I mean, what about the enforcement of it, with the regulators?
I think we have to work on both sides, and we have a lot of catch up to do. When it comes to regulation, I earlier also talked about, we have regulations in place, but these are far, far behind what we see in the other markets. And now we cannot take those years to bring them. We have to all sit down, whether it's the government, whether it's the industry, or whether it's our customers, to say how in the next few years, let's say in next 5 to 7 years, we can bring all those regulations in the Indian market and come at par, if not better, with the rest of the world. Well, if you look at emissions, we've done that already.
Yes.
Right? We all took a concerted action, and in 3 years' time, we switched from BS4 to BS6. I'm sure it will greatly benefit our entire country, right? I think the same thing needs to be replicated on the safety, right? We must not act knee-jerk that we suddenly say next year we need this. I think everyone in the ecosystem needs time to bring a technology which works in the Indian ecosystem, is competitive. We are a cost-sensitive market, we cannot forget about it, but is localized and is competitive. And therefore, I think if we can build a roadmap for next 10 years, where everyone knows what has to be done in 2025, what has to be done in 2027 or 2030, I guess then we all will get down busy to making it happen. So I think that is something which is absolutely needed. And we should not hesitate that we can't bring, for example, lane departure warning or blind spot assist, those kind of technologies. Well, they are not that difficult to do. You need sensors, you need radar systems, you need cameras. All these technologies are quite mature in other markets, right? Where there is a will, there is a way. The second is about enforcement. And I believe here also a lot of work has to be done. I can take example from Japan because I lived there for 4 years. How they do it different. And we all know that the accident rate and the fatality rate in Japanese markets is the best in the world. They're one of the best or the safest country when it comes to road safety. How did they do it? Well, they spend a lot of effort, time, energy, and financial resources on training people, right? It's not so easy to pass a driving test in Japan like it may be in India. It's really enforced. They do it absolutely by the rule book. And I think we have to do something similar. The second is, if there is a violation, they treat it quite severe. So there are fines there, and they are very strictly enforced also by using technology, right? So I think we have to take a similar approach when it comes to enforcing those rules and laws on our roads.
Right. If you were to give 2 or 3 key recommendation or suggestion that could actually potentially help to bring down the number of deaths on road on account of commercial vehicle or commercial vehicle operator, what would they be? What are some of the 3 or 4 suggestions that you would like to present to the government or to the ecosystem in order to ensure that the roads are much more safer, and from not only from the pedestrian perspective but also the other vehicles driving on the road?
2, 3 things. One is, I would definitely ask that let's all sit down together and prepare a safety roadmap for India. A roadmap which takes us to nothing but the best. It brings us at par, if not more, with any Western economy in the world. So let's sit down and let's make that roadmap and let's make it happen. So that's one important aspect. Right. The second is, let's also think about how can we use technology to change the game in the entire ecosystem. So one is the technologies which you provide in the vehicle to make them safer. The second is, like we talked about, enforcement. How can we use technology there? How can we use technology in training our drivers? I think we have to think about how do we do that. And the third is, I would spend a lot of time on training our people, training the drivers. We still lag behind a lot when it comes to giving them those opportunities. So training, use of technology in the vehicle, and enforcement, and preparing a safety roadmap for India.
Right. And just lastly, on your view on the education and awareness, this is one key theme that has emerged over the last couple of days to cross-section of experts that we've spoken to, that there's a lot more need for educating and awareness. What could be done according to you, be it, starting education right at the school level or at driver training school, or should it be mandated by the government of India? From the education and awareness perspective, what's your personal opinion, and how can this element be addressed?
Well, I think it has to start right from the school level, right from the childhood level. That's where it has to begin. That's where the awareness has to be brought in, and that's where the discipline has to be enforced. Right. Once we start to make change at that level, then only you will see that the attitude towards safety will change, and it will be a sustainable change. So I think, and that's one area where we have not worked on enough, right? We see some NGOs, we see the schools, we see some companies doing that bit, but more like CSR. I think it has to become mainstream, right? I once again take example of Japan, where for the first 2 or 3 years, when a child enters school, all what the child is taught is civic sense and safety, not studies. The studies come later, right? I've seen young children crossing roads in Japan like that. They put their hand up so that everyone can see because of their short height. So, that's where they begin. And I think that's where we have to begin. So that's one area where we definitely have to attack. That's a white spot for us. And the second then is, it doesn't stop there. If we have to bring pride into our drivers, that they take this profession, it can also only be done when they are better trained on it. They are made fully aware of all the technologies, and we give them safer vehicles and a safe environment to drive.
Right. Is there a time come to mandate this, as part of the education system, you think, or is it a little too much to ask?
I don't think it's too much to ask. Well, if we want to really take safety serious, then this has to be a part of the curriculum. So it's not too much to ask. I think it's the bare minimum to ask.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Arya. I mean, any more closing statements from your end? We already had some really insightful suggestions and recommendations that we would be very happy to cover. But any closing statement?
Well, in the end, maybe I would just like to say that India is transforming today, and mobility is transforming globally. And I believe that whatever we do in this journey of transformation will be incomplete if we do not take safety also into account. We have to become globally the benchmark in safety when it comes to Indian roads. So let's all work together and make that happen.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mr. Arya. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Ketan. It was an enjoyable discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. On to you, man.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ketan, and thank you, Mr. Arya, for that wonderful conversation and taking us through the key aspects of safety when it comes to commercial vehicles. And with that, we come to the end of the 2-day Autocar Professional Road Safety Conclave, which was brought to you in association with Continental and ATS. Over the last 2 days, we have had a series of engaging discussions with industry leaders and experts who have sort of given a unanimous comment that safety is critical, and there are various measures in the form of technological interventions, as well as the person who is behind the wheel or the handlebar, which is the most crucial element when it comes to ensuring safety on the roads. Today, we discussed about the various challenges on the roads, the black spots, and identification of those spots, and licensing system, how technology can really enable the improvement of licensing system, driver licensing system in India, and how education is most critical when it comes to ensuring safety of vehicles and road users on the roads. So thank you very much once again for logging in over the last 2 days. I am just sharing the link wherein you can access all the videos and all the presentations on the Autocar Professionals YouTube channel. It is there on the chat box right now, www.youtube.com/autocarprofessional1. That is the link that you can access, and you can also log on to the Autocar Professional website, www.autocarpro.in, for all the stories related to the webinar. Until next time, thank you very much for logging in.